All right, Ken is on his way. We can go ahead and start. I hereby call to order this regular meeting of the Board of Education for Regional Connecticut for Monday, February 14th. If everyone can take themselves off of mute and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United
States of America,
and to the republic
to the
which it
republic
stands,
for which it stands,
one nation,
under God,
indivisible, with
with
liberty
liberty
and
and justice for all.
Thank you all. First of all, let me just say thank you all for choosing to spend Valentine's Day with me. I really feel blessed. We do have a pretty packed agenda, so I'm going to try to keep my statement brief. We do have a few items on tonight's agenda that have caused a little bit of concern or interest in the community, so I just want to touch on some of them. First off, we do have a policy that's been in place since 2015 that's up for a revision. We do have some adjusted language for that, as well as our board attorney to help us through that part of the discussion. We do have discussion on further recommendations from DPH, the governor, and the Connecticut State Department of Education, specifically around masking. And we do have our town director of health, Ed Briggs, here to join us for that. And finally, we do have on the agenda the adoption of the Board of Education's budget tonight. There have been a lot of questions about this from different members of the community on a few different topics. I just want to make sure that everyone knows that their concerns have been heard, their emails have been read, and that we'll be discussing that before we make our vote this evening. That's all I've got for tonight, and I will turn it over to Dr. De Silva.
Thank you, Jonathan, and welcome everyone, and happy Valentine's Day. I can see some of you wore your red in the spirit of the day. This week is a nice celebration for our faculty, all of our faculty. The theme I Heart RPS is resonating throughout our school system because of Valentine's Day, and truly because we do heart RPS. So it is a great week. We do have an early dismissal for our students on Thursday. Friday is a staff development day. And next week is the full winter break, which is new for our students and our faculty this year. I think see you smiling, Anj, secretly maybe over there in the corner. That said, we encourage all of our families to make sure that their students return to school on February 28th. We're hoping that our attendance is high, given that they have this great week to spend holiday, actually a little bit more than a week with Friday. So again, hoping that we have all of our kids back to school on the 28th. Just taking a moment to recognize all of the families who have communicated with us on a lot of different topics. At least 3 of them we're talking about tonight. Some of you email the Board of Education and me. Some of you email Aaron and me, and some of you just email me. As a result, there's a lot of emails in my inbox. And just as Jonathan Steckler shared, we do read them all. And so in the spirit of that, I've tried my very best to respond to them, but they multiply for every one. I feel like I get like 3 more. So if you didn't hear from me, please know that I've read them all. I'm hopeful that your questions will be answered tonight. If there's any communication in which I received where your questions are not answered, you can be sure that I will communicate with you after this evening. And if for some reason I don't, please reach back out. Everyone knows how to get me and or my colleagues. We try to be as responsive as we can. But in all transparency, it's been a little bit hard to keep up with the number of emails, a lot of important topics. But like I said, we read them, we receive them, we read them, and we'll get back to you if we haven't yet. All right, so I think that's it for me tonight, Jonathan. It is Black History Month. A lot of good things happening in our school system. I know that many of you tapped into the conversations with Ruby Bridges last week. So all good things happening, despite some bumps on the journey. I think overall we're in a very good place. Okay, I'll turn it over to you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Dr. De Silva. Next up would be committee chair reports. I believe we had a curriculum committee.
Yes, it was a quick meeting. It was a first meeting as a new committee. So we just went over our scope. There were great presentations by Corey and the team. They shared their roles, and I will really encourage parents who missed, there's a lot of questions that have been asked, especially about art. I really would encourage parents to go back and watch that meeting. It's tabbed, you can look at it, and I think it answers a lot of the concerns that are floating around. And as tomorrow will be strategic meeting, we'll talk about it later, but I'm hopeful parents tune in because I think that's important too. Just very quickly, I know it's a long meeting.
Thank you, Tina. Other committee chairs? Rachel.
So the policy committee will not be meeting in February because of winter break. Our next meeting will be on 3/1. For this evening, as part of our review process, the full board will have a second read of policies first brought forward on 1/4. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Any other committee chairs or liaison reports for this evening? No? Selena.
So I met with the what's the name of them? the Ridgefield group.
Education Foundation.
Thank you. The Education Foundation. Thank you. We met on Wednesday, January 26th, and there was discussion about the fact that they need new board members. So they asked that you all please keep that in mind if you know anyone who might be interested in helping. Some of the monies that they have raised have gone to unified sports for middle and high schools, DNA coding, research projects, and mindfulness programs. And I'm just mentioning that for some of the new board members because they might not know. Pam Banks did say that she would like the funds distributed to align with the curriculum. So communication between the district and the foundation is a big plus. So that's it.
Great, thank you, Selena. Any other liaisons for tonight? No? Okay, next up is our student representative, Ansh. Oh, I'm sorry, Amy, do you have an update for us? I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
No problem. PTA, Susie was actually able to join. She was there, and there were lots of questions about art, masks, budgets. So that's it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, Ansh, you're up.
All right, perfect. Good evening, everybody, and happy Valentine's Day. I hope you all got some good sleep after that amazing game last night. Even though personally I wanted Cincinnati to get a taste of sweet victory after so long, Stafford and the Rams, they definitely earned their trophy fair and square. So congrats to them again and any potential Rams fans here tonight. Anyways, what's going on at the high school? Last month could be described as a grind time for students and teachers. We all worked very hard to sprint across the finish line to end first semester. We had midterms from the 24th to the 28th, and they went great. The review days before tests really helped us prepare for success. And on top of that, the newly added midterm stress relief activities organized by student government this year were an absolute hit. In the 30-minute break periods between the tests, students were able to participate in various fun recreations, such as open gym, slime making, coloring. We even had therapy dogs come in for the kids to play with. My personal favorite activity was a primal scream, where a bunch of us went outside and relieved our stress by screaming from the top of our lungs. And as weird as that may sound, it worked quite well. So use that information however you may please. On top of this, student government also organized some Valentine's Day spirited activities for the school. To start the day off, we handed out orange and black buttons with hearts on them to all the students who walked into the building this morning. We also made posters with Valentine's Day jokes or pickup lines, whatever you want to call them, that we taped to every teacher's door in the building to, kind of brighten the mood. Additionally, because the kids love the therapy dogs so much from the midterm activities, we brought them back with a doggy kissing booth where students could pet the dogs, take pictures with them. And all this was in front of like a nice Valentine's Day themed backdrop. This was all free, but we also encouraged donations for which the proceeds will go towards Roar, the animal rescue shelter here in town. On another note, this past Friday was the Ridgefield versus Wilton basketball game, which I'm sure you probably know. I'm pleased to say that we came out on top. The game was arguably more important than the Super Bowl itself. So it was a euphoric feeling to walk out of the gym with the victory on our shoulders. And I know I say this almost every month, but the spirit just seems to be getting better and better in the school. So that's all we could ask for at the end of the day. And that's all I have for you guys tonight. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have the NEAR representative, Robin Askew. Ready?
Good evening, everyone, and happy Valentine's Day. Aunt, you always make me want to go back to high school. You're so enthusiastic with what fun stuff you say is going on there. It's been a busy month for our teachers as well. Many schools have hosted winter music concerts, winter sports are underway. Preparations for spring musicals and plays, as well as art shows, are currently moving forward. That starts early. In addition to all the ongoing clubs and before and after school support and tutoring, et cetera, et cetera. So we're all very busy, but we've been very, very grateful for the following number of positive cases in our district and in our community. And we are very grateful that we've had fewer students who have been requiring temporary remote learning. It's always better to have them in our classes with us. We always love that. We're looking forward to some of the treats and the discounts that the district has going to be provided or promised they're providing. We're very excited. And some of the discounts that the town is providing for teachers this week. We're looking forward to our time together on Thursday afternoon and Friday to be able to wrap our heads together around some professional topics together. The leadership team at NEAR would just like to take this opportunity to share some of our thoughts on the superintendent's proposed budget that is going to be discussed and decided upon this evening. As you can imagine, we follow the budget process very carefully as it directly connects to our livelihood, our working conditions, and the opportunities that we're able to offer students. We fully appreciate the complexities and the nuances of creating a school budget that meets the needs of our students and the expectations of various stakeholders. And we fully appreciate the time that this board has devoted to carefully considering those complexities and nuances. So as I think about my budget, I think about when my own children were young. We had a saying in our home, whenever they would plead for something, we would ask them, do you need it or do you want to need it? Invariably, the answer was that they needed it. But our hope was that the question would cause them to pause and consider that there are many, many, many good things in the world, but not all of those good things are exactly necessities at any particularly given time. So as I think about our current budget proposal, I have to reckon with what our students desperately need and what I want to need on their behalf. There are infinite programs, opportunities, experiences, and tools that we all want for our students, but faced with finite resources, we're forced to triage the needs over the want to needs. This current proposed budget prioritizes many of the critical needs students and teachers are currently experiencing. You've heard me discuss in past months my concerns for our most vulnerable students and for the staff who support those students. This proposed budget keeps that population front and center. Additionally, this proposed budget recognizes that there are many areas that have been historically considered want to need, but after several budget cycles of being pushed to the back burner, those areas are now critical needs. In essence, we're playing catch up in many of those places. But most importantly, this proposed budget recognizes that students are whole human beings who need support across social, emotional, mental, and physical health in order to develop cognitively. So as you vote on the proposed budget tonight, I request that you continue to keep in mind the areas of critical need that this budget prioritizes. There's simply very little want to needs in this budget proposal that we can afford to trim. So we request that you please continue to support our students with this budget. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. The Bengals were robbed, and happy February break.
Thank you very much for that. And next up, our PTA representative.
Happy Valentine's Day, everyone.
There you go, Kim.
The Ridgefield PTAs have been busy celebrating our teachers during the Love Our Teachers Week that the district put together. Branchville PTA has been working with their principal to decorate the doors and provide treats to their teachers. And Barlow is planning to place door signs on their teachers' doors. It's Invention Convention time, and Branchville has 29 students signed up and Farmingville has 11. So we can't wait to see what these students create for us. Farmingville also had their Take Apart night where students got to take apart old electronics, see their inner workings, and put them back together. And Barlow has been hosting their monthly STEAM and wellness challenges for their students. Barlow also hosted their first ever readathon, where the students read a collective 165,000 minutes. Students earned prizes for their reading. Farmingville hosted their book swap, where students cleaned out their home libraries and were able to shop for new books to take home. Barlow's PTA invited their SEL team to present to parents on how Barlow utilizes responsive classroom and ruler. Branchville has their general PTA meeting on March 9th, where the math specialist, Mrs. Opal, will do another edition of their popular series, Come Play School, which shows parents how children learn math concepts in elementary school. Farmingville hosted a virtual family trivia night with Nancy Karen, and it included a Kahoot with prizes and winners and pizza kits from Pizza It Yourself. They also completed the first phase of their Be Kind Ben's Bells mural, and the Kids Care Club decorated and made treat bags for Meals on Wheels clients for Valentine's Day. And finally, on March 23rd, Branchville is sponsoring a panel discussion of the impacts of social media on young children. It's facilitated by one of their Branchville parents who happens to be an expert in the field. And that's all we have. Have a great night.
Thank you so much. Okay, moving right along, the next item up is the approval of the January 10th minutes. Do I have a motion?
I move that the Board of Education approve the minutes of January 10th, 2022.
Thank you, Rachel. Do I have a second? Thank you, Sean. Any comments or amendments to the minutes as presented? There being none, all those in favor of approving the minutes from January 10th, 2022, please raise your hands. I believe that is unanimous. Thank you all very much. And we can move on now to the discussion and action items for tonight. First off, we have a discussion item around the timing of public comment. Throughout our remote existence, the last 2 years of COVID, we've had public comment at the end of our meetings. The move to that, to the end of our meetings was really a logistical move based on giving people the ability, the time to sign up for public comment. But listening to this board at our retreat a few weeks ago and to comments from the members of the community, I feel like it's best that we move back to something in between where we were and where we are now. And I'm recommending to this board that we move to a 2-period public comment. First, at the beginning of the meetings with up to 10 members of the public being able to comment. And then following on to that at the end of the meeting, as it has been over the past 2 years for anyone that did not have time to speak. The idea behind that, of course, is A, that we get people to be able to speak prior to our discussion about items, but B, that we get ourselves to be able to get into the meat of the meetings before it gets too late. It's my thought that by breaking it up and giving people both times, they'll be able to hear from more members of the public while getting our work done. But I do want to hear from the members of this board. This isn't a vote, but I do want to make sure that we have a general consensus that this is the right path going forward. Do I have any comments? Tina? And then
I
Sean.
completely agree. I mean, I think it is so needed. And I think it's a great idea. We're doing it both in the beginning and in the end. And I think it makes sense that we do limit in the beginning of the meetings because, and also maybe we can make this clear to people that if there's a comment that somebody else has said for them, they can just come in and say, you know, this is what I wanted to say. But I think the more we can do to communicate and we can let our parents have the opportunity to share back with us and give them that platform, I think it's a great idea. I completely support this. Thank you.
Thanks, Tina. Sean, you had a comment?
Yeah, more community engagement, always better than less. How do we come up with the arbitrary number of 10? Given the amount of inbox emails we've gotten this week, it seems kind of arbitrary. How do we choose those 10? How do we balance the voices? I don't understand any of the mechanics underneath that.
That's fair. The number 10 was an arbitrary number based on my proposal of having about 30 minutes at the beginning of the meeting and the remainder at the end of the meeting. So that's where the 10 came from. However, if this group suggests a different number, certainly open to me. And as far as the logistics of who those 10 would be, it would be based on when people signed up to speak. So it would be the first 10 or the first other number other than 10.
It sounds like a bad lottery to me, but I could be completely wrong.
Could be. I mean, it could be a bad lottery and you could be wrong. I'm not sure which. Other thoughts? Tom?
Thank you. It sounds like a very good and reasonable suggestion. 10 sounds like a reasonable number. The only caveat I would say is we might want to consider having a reasonable end time to the meeting so that we are not, public members are not, and school staff people are not staying past whatever we think is a reasonable time to conclude the meeting.
Thank you. And that makes sense. And I guess that's part of the rationale behind limiting the number at the beginning. But I also didn't want to cut anyone off. We are a public body, and I do want to make sure that if there are a large number of people that want to speak, that we are available to speak, to hear them speak. That said, the work we do and the work that the administration does shouldn't be too late in the nights most often. Thank you. Other thoughts? Amy?
As we discussed in the previous meeting, and as I've already said, I totally agree with this. I think it's a great idea to have people be able to speak at the beginning and also at the end. I appreciate both options, and I also understand that, you know, we want to have a time limit sort of at the beginning and maybe at the end as well.
Thank you. Any other thoughts on this? Sean?
Yeah, I completely disagree to the time limit, especially at the end. I want to hear from everybody all the time, as much as I want to talk. 3 minutes is the limit per person. If I got to sit here for 2 hours and listen to the community, I'm going to sit here for 2 hours and listen to the community. I'm sorry. That's what we're here for.
Thanks, Sean. Ken?
Yeah, I agree with Sean. I mean, that we serve at the pleasure of the community. So if the community has thoughts that they want to share specific to our budget or to the job that we're doing, I think they do need the opportunity to express those views. That being said, I think at the beginning, if there is some way that we can figure whether 10 is the right number or there's a 20 is the right number, 15, I think we do, because we do need to get to the business that we're here to do. And often the business that we conduct at a particular meeting answers the questions that people have regarding, for example, a particular policy or something that's good. If that's going to be covered at that meeting, their questions may be answered prior to them asking. So
Thanks, Ken.
thank you.
Rachel?
I agree with Sean and Ken. I think it's okay in the beginning to have a certain number of people speak, but I definitely want to hear from the entire community, whether that's 20 or 30 people at the end of the night. That's why we're here. We're here to listen, be there.
Thank you, Rachel. Tina?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I do agree for the end. I understand the reason we have to limit in the beginning. We do need to do the business at hand because it makes us tough. But absolutely agree with all that has been said by Sean, Ken, and Rachel. We've said it, I've said it so many times, we are here to serve the parents. And of course the kids come. So the part of the meeting business is the kids part, but then we also need to give our parents an opportunity. And I think to one point which Sean mentioned, how do we cut off parents after a certain amount, right? That's also, we need to be fair to every parent who signed up. So in the beginning, we can make reasons, but if there are parents who are going to wait through the entire meeting, at the end of the meeting, how do we make that judgment call and say, I'm sorry, 20 minutes or 40 minutes are up? I do appreciate the thought, Tom. Trust me, I was there past superintendents when meetings ran till 12, and I was not even a member of the board. I was a PTA person. So I appreciate the thought, I truly do. But I also understand that it's very tough to cut parents who may feel passionately about a topic. And I think that's what we always need to be careful about, that we need to give every parent an opportunity to have their voice heard and to be as fair as possible we can about it. So.
Thank you, Tina. Selena and then Ken.
I agree that we need to definitely listen to everybody. I'm wondering if we had maybe 25 people that signed up, could we split it? Maybe half in the beginning and half at the end. That's just a suggestion. And also one way to maybe keep the time down to a minimum is I've noticed some people are writing in and then we're expected to read their written word. Well, we've already read it. So I'm not sure what the point is to then read it. And I think that takes up time. I don't know. Have you all seen that? There's been a couple of emails that have come in and so that's sort of, if people want to talk, then they can come in and talk and they can read their testimony. But for us to read their testimony, that takes up a lot of time. So that might be a way to minimize the length of the meeting, like Tom said, because we are, all volunteers and we're reading what they're writing anyway. So just a thought. We used to not do that. And that's something new here in the district.
Thanks, Selena. Ken?
I think maybe if we're concerned that there's a lot of comments at the end or at any point where it's running us over, maybe we could take a step back and look at, are we just not doing a great job of communicating to the public? Because a lot of the questions, and frequently we get questions and letters that are asking to clarify something that we're working on. So maybe if we get ahead of that a little bit, that might cut down on some of the public, at least the questions, not the comment. If people feel strongly about something, obviously they're going to comment. But we could take a look at that also if we notice that becomes midnight meetings till midnight. So
thanks, Ken. Sean and then Tom.
Yeah, I think we're missing the plot here. People write to the board because they want us to read the written word. They want to speak at the board meeting because they want to speak to the public. They want the public to hear what they say. Those are two different activities. We need to be really cognizant of that.
Thanks, Sean. Tom.
Yeah, I think we also have to use some common sense. If we have a reasonable time limit, perhaps midnight, 11:30 p.m. I think if we go much past that, that just defies common sense. So if we're going to have people who want to speak after 11:30 p.m., I'm happy to schedule a meeting for the very next night at 7 p.m. to continue and finish the other comments. So I'm not suggesting we stop at 9:05. If people are there to speak, they should be heard. But I don't think anyone thinks it's reasonable to have a public meeting past midnight. And if we're in a situation where that has to happen, just continue it to the next day. Nothing is that much of an emergency that it can't wait till 7 p.m. the next day.
Thanks, Tom. Liz.
Yeah, just in response to that, unfortunately, during the legislative session at the state level, that happens all the time where people wait until 2, 3 in the morning to be heard on the topic at hand. So it's not unusual. While I certainly respect that people have end times for their own personal gain, I don't think that we should arbitrarily cut someone off who might not be able to be there the next night and may have committed that time because it was a topic that they were concerned about. I, for one, encourage as much of this interaction from the community as humanly possible for our board. I do think that an hour or so at the beginning of a meeting is a really great idea, and or somewhere midway in the agenda before topics. If we know something has gotten a lot of feedback from the community already or may be confusing, we may want to just consider what's on the agenda that night and separate topics that may take more time for everyone to have their voice heard, especially our stakeholders in the community. So just something to consider. I don't know if it's just beginning and end, but maybe there's a way to break this up for topics that require or have more interaction expected.
Absolutely. Sean and the Navy.
Yeah, just procedurally, correct me if I'm wrong, Jonathan, but we can't schedule a meeting for the next day because of the noticing rules. We have to notice 24 hours in advance.
Correct. Amy?
Hi. yes, I am all for hearing every parent that has something to say for sure. And I don't want anyone cut off and not heard for sure. I'm wondering also, people who have children, for some, they want to be heard at the beginning of the meeting because it's easier for them with their children. And then for some, it might be easier at the end. And I'm just wondering, when people are signing up, if we're going to give them at least those two options, possibly more if we go with what Liz is saying, if they can maybe write or indicate which time slot they might prefer.
That's a good idea. Just to bring this to a close, and seeing as we're potentially making this change now, we could always make a change again in the future based on how things work out. Is there any strong opposition to the idea of starting next meeting to a 2-period public comment with up to 30 minutes, 10 people at the beginning, and everyone else that wants to speak at the end? And then we can revisit if that does not meet the needs of the community. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. Thank you. We can move on. I appreciate all the feedback. I do. Next item up, we're going to move on to the policies, starting with policy 3524.1, pesticide application. Do I have a motion?
I move that the Board of Education approve policy 3524.1, pesticide application.
Do I have a second? Ken, thank you. Any comments here? This is the second read. There being none, all those in favor of approving policy 3524.1, pesticide application, please raise your hands. Unanimous. Thank you very much. Moving on to policy 3524.2, green cleaning. Do I have a motion?
I move that the Board of Education approve policy 3524.2, green cleaning.
Thank you, Rachel. Do I have a second?
Second.
Ken, thank you. Do we have any questions, comments, or amendments? There being none, all those in favor of approving policy 3524.2, green cleaning, please raise your hands. Unanimous. Thank you very much. And moving on, policy 5113.2, attendance, truancy, and chronic absenteeism. Do I have a motion?
I move that the Board of Education approve policy 5113.2, attendance, truancy, and chronic absenteeism.
Thank you, Rachel. Do I have a second? Tina, thank you. Any questions, comments, or proposed revisions? There being none, all those in favor of approving policy 5113.2, please raise your hands. Unanimous. Thank you very much. Moving on, policy 5141.2, immunizations. Do I have a motion?
I move that the Board of Education approve policy 5141.2, immunizations.
Thank you, Rachel. Do I have a second?
Ken,
thank you. Do I have any amendments, revisions, comments on this policy? There being none, all those in favor of approving policy 5141.2, immunizations, please raise your hands. 8-4, do I have any abstentions? Any against? Thank you. We have 8-4 and 1 against on this policy. Thank you. And moving on, policy 5241.3, health assessments. Take a motion and then we'll have a discussion. Do I have a motion?
Sure. I move that the Board of Education approve policy 5141.3, health assessments.
Thank you, Rachel. Do I have a second? Ken, thank you. Discussion.
Jonathan?
Yes.
Just as a point of information on the agenda, I believe that policy is misnumbered.
Correct.
That matters.
5141.3, correct?
Yes.
that'll be adjusted. Dr. De Silva?
Okay, so I saw some hands go in the air just before. So this policy for sure has drawn a lot of attention from our board actually, but also from our families. It was one of those topics that I think was hard for families to understand. So there's just a couple of things that I'd like to point out before we jump into the board discussion on this. During a policy committee, when we bring a policy to the Board of Education, at any point, the Board of Education, within the Board of Education meeting, may make adjustments. So we typically have CABE policies or Shipman and Goodwin policies that give us some type of guidance, but we oftentimes will shift the language to meet our needs. So I just want to point that out, that at any time, either in committee or the full board, we can make adjustments. If it feels like there's a lot of adjustments to be made, it's probably better sent to committee. That said, as you mentioned earlier, Jonathan, this is a policy that we've had since 2015. And the language is, I think, can be, the clarity could be desired. And so a couple of things happened since our last meeting. First, when we looked at the policy, and you're going to notice that there is some language changes. And I actually made those changes. And then in consultation with Shipman and Goodwin, Rebecca Santiago, the board attorney, is here tonight. I made those changes because I did feel that our families would have a greater level of comfort with the changes that I made. This policy is intended to protect families and students, and Rebecca will talk about that in a minute. But I just wanted to highlight that those changes that I've made, I know from Rebecca, did not change the spirit of what this policy was intended to be, but at the same time, I think adds a safety net for families that perhaps wasn't felt before, at least in the communication that I believe I've received. And I think the board would agree in the communication that they've received. So I'll leave it to Rebecca to talk about how this policy came to be. And then I'll talk about some of the shifts in language, and then certainly for the board discussion. That all right with you, Jonathan? Oh, I think he said absolutely on mute.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
All right, so I can comment really briefly. The policy is based on requirements from federal law, specifically the PPRA, which is the Pupil Protection Rights Amendment. And specifically what the PPRA requires is a couple things. It requires that parents be given notice of their rights, of all of the things that are listed in the PPRA, which is, I think, the main reason why this language was in there, was because we were attempting to provide notice that parents have certain protections, specifically the right to be notified, that if things were to happen, that they would be advised before that they did, and that they would have been given an opportunity to opt their child out. So the law requires that we provide that notice. And then the law also requires that we provide the details and explain to people, what it is that we're talking about. And if we were ever to utilize this procedure, we would have to advise parents at the start of the school year that we were expecting to utilize this language. So primarily the language was just protective of parents, just providing them notice of their rights. And then also just covering the school district although at this current moment, we have no intention of utilizing this language, if ever we were to utilize it under the law, we would have to provide them notice. And so we were just abiding by the provisions of the statute, which state that we should tell parents, if we ever utilize this, you will be notified in advance. So that was really all the intent of this language. And I think what Dr. De Silva was just referring to is we moved the order around a little bit in the language to make it even clearer that that was our only intent. And so I'm hoping that the clarified language makes it clearer to parents that it was really only intended to protect people's rights. And actually, one other note I want to make is that under the law, all that's required is the ability to opt out of these procedures. And
under Dr. De Silva's language, it would be one step higher. It would be that we would require consent before we utilized this procedure. So that's actually going above and beyond what federal law requires, which the board does not have to do, but is certainly going above and beyond what is legally required is not problematic under the law. It's more protective of parents. So hopefully that answers some questions.
So Rebecca, I think what's really, really important is even though our families, and rightfully so, are looking at this and saying like, when in the world would you ever do one of these things, right? And we all came together, and that's Aaron and myself, and quite frankly, Rebecca and Ed Briggs and Dr. Hearn, and we asked ourselves that exact same question. When would we ever? Because there's some, when you read through the whole policy, there are examples of things that we could think of, but when you look, like, for example, on pages 6 of 7, when it says, if the district elects to conduct any such non-emergency invasive physical examination screenings, then at the beginning of the school year, the district would then, the administration would give notice to parents. So we couldn't think of anything that we would do when we have to give notice at the start of the school year with actual dates. But it's intended to protect students and their families from a district doing this without giving them notice. And I think that's the important piece that's really critical. It's intended to protect the students and the families from the district doing this without giving them notice. That
Right.
said, to Rebecca's point, we took it a step further than the opt-out, because I think for a family, it felt like, wait, what if I miss this opt-out, right? I don't check the box. So instead we said, okay, how can we add another layer of comfort to a family member? And that's where we added in the language around written consent. The reason you'll notice on your agenda that there's another policy there, which is the PPRA, student privacy. We have another policy that reflects the same language of this policy, and that's 5125.1. So I made I edited that language to reflect the same language that's in this 5141.3. So that's the reason that you're seeing both of them there, just so that they line up. So on the 5125.1 and the 5141.3, if you're looking at the change of language, pages 5 through 7 and pages 6 of 7 in the 5125.1. So hopefully that added some clarity. I have to tell you, we really fought to think about an example of when we would, and thankfully we can't think of one. While at the same time, what's important for us as a district is to ensure that our students do have their privacy protected and our families are aware of their rights, and that we've put things in place that even take it a step further.
Thank you for taking us through all that. So 5141.3 is in front of us as a second read. Motion is on the table. Do we have questions as amended in front of us? Liz and then Sean.
Yeah, so thank you. I've read through the PPRA quite a few times, and I understand where the language came from that's in this. However, not every district in Connecticut. I also went through the CABE libraries for some nearby districts. They don't have this policy written this way. And we also can't find any reason that a district would ever have cause to conduct a non-emergency invasive screening of any kind. And that language is still in there. It gives our school district the right to invade personal privacy, to do invasive medical things, whether the parents have consent or not. The district shouldn't have that capability for a non-emergency situation. You can't think of a reason to use it. Therefore, this policy is moot, and say reference PPRA. This policy is way overstepping the bounds of education, which is the goal of this district. So I still have serious issues. I've read through PPRA. I know why it's in there. I've read everything I can find on both the direction for districts and both FERPA and PPRA, which come together. And whether we talk about intent here in this room or not, doesn't really matter. What's in the policy that gets promoted and passed through is what matters. So unless you can put specific scenarios by which a school district employee would have any cause to do a non-emergency invasive treatment on a child, then put it in here as that specific. Otherwise, I think this policy needs to go back to the drawing board and really reflect the Ridgefield Public Schools perspective on school employees of any kind performing invasive non-emergency procedures on a child. And I have her PPR right in front of me, so I know exactly where it came from. I get what you were trying to do, Rebecca, but I'm sorry, I just don't believe that this is an appropriate policy for our school district, the way it's currently written.
Thank you, Liz. Sean, then Ken, then Tom.
Yep, 100% agree with Liz. That section of this policy has no business being in our district, but more procedurally, Jonathan, with the language changes, is this a second read or is this actually now a first read?
That's a good question. I do believe we did ask to, it's a good question. I believe it would count as a second read with amendments, but I'm not certain. I'll have to
I don't think that to be accurate. Can we take that back and check that? Because I don't think we have an ability to vote on this tonight.
We do have our board attorney, so maybe she can opine on that.
I can pull up the bylaw if you want me to. Hold on.
Thanks.
And I didn't know if you wanted me to answer any of the, tell me if you want me to respond to any of the concern. I didn't want to speak out of order, but if you want me to answer any of the legal questions, just let me know.
Sure. Let's take a few more comments from board members and then yes, we'd like that. Ken, I believe you were next, and then Tom, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see the concerns that Liz raised. I just had me and my semantics questions. But as I read the policy, I just see it as physical examinations or screenings, not procedures. I mean, I think that's an important point of distinction. I mean, we're still going to have the discussion, but I don't see it as a procedure, more as an examination or a screening. I don't know if that makes any difference, but those are two completely different things.
Thanks for the clarification, Ken. Tom, then Selena.
Yeah, I had two questions, and perhaps I'm wrong, but my understanding is this policy is of some sort was in the policy manual for the last 6 or 7 years. So I'm wondering why now, especially when some of the board members have been on the board for that period of time, this is now being raised. I mean, these are good questions. I don't know. I'm just wondering why it was never raised before. And then my question for council is, if we do not have this policy, are we exposing the district to potential liability?
Thanks,
Do you
Tom.
want me to answer that now, or?
Let me take Selena. She might be the last comment. She'll last hand raised, and then Rebecca. Yes.
I thought this policy was basically for children with pre-existing conditions. I mean, because I feel like, and maybe I'm wrong, so I guess I am asking Rebecca that also. I mean, if a child can't be in school without some medical interventions, don't we need some sort of policy that speaks to that? I mean, a catheter, there's all sorts of things. I mean, when you have like medically fragile children attending school, you need some sort of policies, and there are some invasive procedures that children with specific medical conditions need. So, I really don't think that the district has like an operating room and they're going to like sneak and do kind of procedures. I do trust the district with this policy, but do we have, if we're not going to use this policy, do we have something to protect our children that need help? What would we replace it with?
Thanks, Selena. Rebecca, you want to try to answer some of these questions and concerns, starting with Liz?
Sure. So this language is in our model policy. So it does exist in many other districts, but the intent is exactly as I explained before. It is simply because the PPRA has two components. One, it states that if you're ever going to engage in these, if in a non-invasive screening, that you need to provide notice in advance. And so we wanted to make clear to everyone that that's the case. So although I can't think of one, I have racked my brain. I thought maybe lice were a good example, but then I don't know I couldn't give you advance notice of when you're going to get lice, thank God. But anyway, I can't think of a great example, but I also don't know that there's not going to be something that comes up in the future that would make someone think I need to do a screening of, of students. And I think the reason it's in our model is because we want to make sure that a school administrator knows, although something could come up in the future that they think a screening is a good idea, that before they're doing that, they need to give advance notice. They need to give parents the right to opt out. So the reason the policy exists is for those things that we can't anticipate, that if there is something in the future, there is some written policy that guides district staff to be able to know, oh, wait, I can't just do a screening. I can't do a non-emergency invasive screening that meets this definition without giving notice to parents, without giving them an opportunity to opt out, or in this revised policy, consent. So that was the reason the language is written like that. And I do acknowledge it is, I'm sorry that I can't come up with an example, although I think that speaks volumes that there isn't an intent by the district to currently employ this. It's more that if should something come up in the future, we wanted to make it abundantly clear that they had to follow these protocols. In terms of liability, the PPRA specifies that there's an enforcement clause, which is pretty broad. It specifies that the U.S. Department of Education has the right to take action as they quote unquote deem appropriate to enforce this section. So obviously, including the language and providing the notice helps us to never have to face the situation where we would have to face some sort of enforcement action and as they deem appropriate. It does specify that the removal of federal funding would be only after the department determined that we didn't provide such notice and didn't do so voluntarily. But still, even the fact that they reference the fact that we could lose federal funding, of course, makes us think that it's in our interest to provide notice. But all these questions that you're raising are very valid, and I certainly understand both sides of this issue. I think those are the answers to most of those questions. The only other one was Selena's question about does it pertain to at-risk children or children with significant needs? And no, it does not. What this is really about screenings. It's really about, like, should there be some instance where we need to screen students? And the invasive part is that we would have to look at their body parts. And so we wanted to make clear that the language makes clear that before you went and screened or screen students for something, which I can't think of at the moment, but could come up in the future, that you would provide parental notice and you would provide the parents an opportunity to say, no, I don't want you to check my child for that. And they exempt out specific things like hearing or vision screenings, which would qualify, would be invasive because you do go and look in children's ears, but they opt those kind of provisions out. But let's say there's some other kind of screening that comes up in the future that would fit in this definition. What this policy says is before we employ that, we will provide the notice.
Rebecca, can I just jump in for a second? Selena, just to answer another part of your question, you said, where would these other children that you described that may have specific needs, a catheter, et cetera, those are part of individual healthcare plans that we create at the school. That's alongside the nurse, a doctor's order, the principals are involved in those. And on occasion we have those in 504s too, but those are very specific to the child. And there's a team that's a part of that process. Rebecca,
there is also a policy though. It's also the administration of medication policy should also address that. So, thank you. Sorry, Dr. De Silva, that I forgot to mention that. But yes, there is a separate policy about administration of medication.
Rebecca, just while we're on that, on the other policy, let's just say that, I'm not saying we would do this, but let's just say we didn't want this policy at all. Would that then leave more vulnerability to the student and to the parent that perhaps, I know wouldn't, right? I trust my district too, but I'm just saying, would our families and our students be more vulnerable without the policy than with it?
That's the thinking. The thinking is let's have the language in. So if there is some situation that were to arise and an administrator were to think to themselves, I really need to screen students for X, Y, and Z that we can't think of right now because it hasn't arisen yet, that they would look at this policy and they would say, oh, I can't do that because I need to have provided advanced notice. I need to obtain parental consent. So that is exactly the reason the language is in there. It's those two things, to provide the notice and to ensure that if it were to arise, administrators were aware of these things. And so if we didn't have the policy in place, the concern is that an administrator who isn't as familiar as all of us now on PPRA wouldn't realize that they had these extra levels of protection that needed to be in place.
Thank you. While you're going, and then Tina, on to you. Rebecca, to Sean's question regarding whether this is a second read or not, in my mind, it is a second read with an edit, but what do you know as far as bylaws?
I tried to pull up your bylaw while you were talking, but then I started talking again. So I'm good, Jonathan, but I'm not that good. I got to read.
I'll move on to Tina.
Move on to Tina and I'll try to pull up the bylaw.
Okay, I'm just, for every parent listening here tonight, taking away everything. I'm a parent, I joined the district. My default is opt out. If the district needs to do whatever is listed or not, whatever, what comes up in the future, the district would need to tell me as a parent, this is coming up and I have to give consent. I think, am I understanding that correct? Because, I get the thing, but I'm just thinking of any parent who's listening in, who's just tuning in, the default setting is opt out.
In the law says parents have to be given an opportunity to opt out. So by putting consent, that would mean that we would tell parents, if we want to do the screening, parent would have to respond back, I consent to permit that to occur to my child. So that opt out would mean simply we provide the notice, and if the parent writes and says, don't do it, then we won't do it. But the assumption is you're a yes unless you respond. We've made it that you must affirmatively tell us that you are okay with us doing the screening of your child. So that's why I'm saying it's a higher level of protection.
So it's a no till I say yes.
Correct. Instead of a yes until I say
Instead of
no.
then going to no. But I do appreciate Liz's point that when you read this as a parent coming in, it is the most confusing thing. I took away and I gave it to my husband. He's like, I don't understand this too. So I do appreciate that point. I do want to highlight that. So I do understand it, but I also think it's important that we keep in mind, as a parent right now, it's a no. Nobody's touching my child till I consent. I think that's the one concern we were coming up. Just wanted to clear that. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thanks, Tina. Rachel.
Thank you, Jonathan. Just a couple of comments. I do have the policy in front of me as well, the direct PPRA. So first of all, if you look at it in subsection 2A, it says parental notification of policies. The policy is developed by a local educational agency, that's us, we're in LEA, under paragraph 1, shall provide for reasonable notice of the adoption or continued use of such policies directly to the parents of students enrolled in schools served by that agency. If you then look at section C, activities requiring the notification, yes, it is there, any non-emergency invasive physical examination or screening. I think what's important is the definition of parent. Here is defined as someone who is legally responsible for the welfare of the child. I think the definition is really important because by notifying parents of their rights, we are protecting the rights of the student through the parent who is legally responsible for the welfare of the child. So to me, that is the spirit behind this subsection, which is the protection of rights.
Thank you, Rachel. Liz and then Sean.
Thank you. After reading the policy and reading and listening to the responses here, given that we have PPRA explicitly excludes things the schools already do, like scoliosis and hearing and vision. There's 3 that are listed out quite directly. None of you, highly educated people who are in schools all day long, can think of any example by which this is relevant. As such, I would recommend we go back and edit this to say, Ridgefield Public Schools will not do any invasive, non-emergency procedure on any of our students. Because if it's not an emergency, there's no reason for you to do it. And if there is a reason, you can bring it back to the board and we can amend the policy at that point. Because the rest of this is just templated information, no disrespect to the legal profession that put it together. But as a parent and layman in the district, you should be able to read this and very much understand under what scenarios this policy would be applied. And none of us here can explain that. So we shouldn't just brush that off and say, well, it's the template, so we got to just do it because a couple other school districts said we should. We need to do and represent what's right for Ridgefield, which is that our school district shouldn't be performing invasive non-emergency medical procedures of any kind, whether they're screening or otherwise, without coming to this board and having a rationale for that, because it's not an emergency. So, and just there was a comment made earlier about, well, this has been in place for a while. Well, I wasn't on the board when it got in place. I'm not sure who was, but even so, there's always time for change and evolution of the work that we do for our districts. And I think we should be not only accepted, but excited about that, because otherwise nothing would change and grow and be transformed in a positive way. So my recommendation is we take this language out and we say we do follow the rules of PPRA, both for surveys and everything else, and that our school district simply won't perform these things. They're not an emergency. So that would be my recommendation on this policy.
Thanks, Liz. Sean, you were next.
Yeah, I'm kind of struck by the absurdity of the amount of time we've spent on a policy that nobody can come up with grounds for what this is even about, which is why I agree with Liz, and B, I think we should take this language out altogether and just point back to PPRA. We're spending an awful lot of cycles. We're getting parents wound up on something that nobody can even provide an example on, yet this exists in other districts and nobody can explain why. This is stupid. I'll just leave it at that.
Thanks, Sean. Selena.
She's the attorney. We pay people to help us and to keep us out of trouble. Like, none of us are attorneys except for Tom. He's a judge. And Rebecca. We don't all understand legalese. We may need this at some point, and now the parents have to opt in. They have to opt in. So if they have to opt in, what's the problem? Like that solved the whole problem. The parents have to opt in. They have to say, this is okay. Nobody in the district has to sign this if they don't want to. No parent has to sign it. There's your out. But at least we have it. We don't have to worry about losing federal funding. We don't have to, we can say, well, we had this policy. You decided not to sign it. The onus is on the parents. The onus is not on the district. That protects us. It's silly. Why are we even debating this? It's up to the parents. We just gave all the power back to the parents, but we need to protect the district. And that's what we're doing by keeping this policy. It's there for a reason.
Thank you, Selena. If I can just jump in for a second. I'm at the moment feeling comfortable in approving the policy as revised here for the main reason that in the bottom of page 507, it basically says in a nutshell, the district can't do any of this without a parent saying, okay. And we don't know what any of this is yet, but whatever it might end up being, district can't do it without the parent saying, okay. And without that, the parent doesn't have that same right there in the policy guarantee. So I'm in preference. I'm preferring approving this edit, but I do want to keep on hearing for more. I think, Sean, you did have a.
I did look at the bylaw too, if you want me to answer that question.
Rebecca, yeah, thank you.
I think it's okay that it can be the policy states that policy proposals and amendments shall normally be submitted to all members of the board and prior to a regularly scheduled meeting. But in terms of the language about when it's adopted, it just says policies will, unless by vote of 2/3 of the members, be adopted or amended after consideration at 2 regular meetings of the board. So I do think you have considered it at 2 regular meetings of the board. Of course, that doesn't stop you from, if you wish to delay it, that you may, but I think it meets the language of the bylaw.
Thank
I
you.
think I'm up next, Jonathan. With the changes we've got, I disagree that this is a second read. I'm seeing this language, the stuff in blue, for the very first time, and it's substantial. This is not insignificant amount of changes. So I would contend that this is a first read. But I'm open to being wrong. Now, in terms of protecting the district, Rebecca, correct me if I'm wrong, you said there really was no challenge in that, with or without this policy. PPRA is the backstop on that. I'm not one that's in favor of just spending legal dollars to come up with policies that aren't germane or relevant to our district. And I still have heard no relevancy, no reason for this policy that anybody can articulate. Why is this here?
Primarily because, oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Dr. DeSilva.
No, I was going to answer it, and I know Rebecca could answer it better than I could, but primarily because it's connected to PURPA. That's really why it's here. Otherwise, that's why we get model policies. There are some in which, in many ways are here to protect students or families or the district. In this particular case, that's what it's intended to do, and that's the spirit of it. I don't know, to Liz's point earlier, Rebecca, and you would have to answer this question, if we just referred to PURPA and said that we would never do those things, if that's if that went back to committee and that was a change, whether or not that would.
The thing is that the statute says it's not, we will never do these things. It's, if you ever do these things, you have to provide notice and you have to provide the ability to opt out. And then it also explicitly states that you have to provide parents of their rights under PPRA. So the reason that this policy is written is not because we can think of a reason to do it, but because we are required to give parents the notice of their rights. And so we got this in there to say, we won't ever do these things unless we give parents these rights. And then it's also written so that if ever an administrator were to think, hey, I want to do this, they know that they have to give parents these rights. That is the reason. And I, as I've stated over and over again, because I have tremendous respect for so many of the people who have commented tonight, I certainly understand where you're coming from. And I don't go out of my way to create policies that I can't think of reasons to use them either. I have to be honest with you. And I had a very funny conversation with my colleagues who write the model policies, because I totally understand where you're coming from. And I understand why parents ask these questions. But I know that's why we did it. We did it to cover, it's because the statute explicitly says give parents rights, notice of their rights. And it says that we need to do these, we need to have these measures in place. And so we think that the safest thing is to have the policy so everybody knows what their rights are. And everybody knows that if ever we were to ever do this, that we couldn't do so without getting consent. We couldn't do so without providing notice at the start of the school year. So that is why, but I certainly understand those questions.
Thank you. Tom, and then Liz.
Thank you. I would ask that we just take a step back and use some common sense. This policy, which is being recommended by our council, who's very experienced in this field, is designed to protect children and families. It's not designed to give teachers and administrators the power to run around the classrooms with scalpels and stethoscopes to perform procedures on people. What I'm afraid is happening here is this is indicative of a bigger problem than this policy presents. We as a board can do a better job of communicating with the community and putting people at ease, as opposed to getting them riled up with a discussion about this. This is to protect children, to protect families. And somehow, some way, we've lost sight of this, and it's turned into somewhat of a political issue where people think that we want Dr. DeSilva handing out prescription tablets and needles to teachers to perform procedures on students. That's not what this is about. This is about protection of students. And I would just ask that we take a step back and use some common sense.
Thank you, Tom. Liz, you were next.
Yeah, as a parent, and I'm glad that our community is speaking up and asking questions about an unclear policy that's written with broad responsibilities going to a school employee, when if that situation, if the policy said you cannot do that, it would say the same thing as we might do that and we have to go get your permission. No, you simply can't. The policy is actually very clear for the administrators that they cannot do this. It is not part of the RPS allowed actions for an administrator at all. There's no lack of clarity. There's no opt-in required because you're not going to do anything. It's against policy. The other thing I would say is I have looked at neighboring school districts. They do not have this policy in their book. Now, some of them use Shipman and Goodman. Most of them do. Some of them look at the policies and apply them to their localities. And it's, again, no disrespect to the body of templates that Shipman and Goodwin put out for CABE to use and for other bodies to use. But often school districts look at those and say, what's right for our community? Because that's why we have local school districts. In this case, my strong recommendation is to use common sense and write this in such a way that any parent who comes into this district who doesn't have the advantage of sitting through a meeting in February of 2022 doesn't have any questions about what's in here and when and what the intention and spirit is. Because a spirit of a law doesn't matter when you pass a policy. What's in the policy matters. When all of us are gone away from this role, it should be absolutely clear to any parent or guardian walking in what we will and won't do. As such, I would say clarify it to say we simply won't do this as a district. That's even more than what the burden of PPRA says, which is we have to give permission. We say we're not going to need permission because we're not going to touch your kid when it's not an emergency with anything invasive. So with that, I'll stop, but I cannot in good conscience say this is applicable to our district. And no one has convinced me that this isn't anything that parents shouldn't be riled up about because they're representing protecting their own children from actions that an administrator might take. And, implied consent, proactive consent, whatever it is, they should never even be taking because it's a non-emergency invasive situation. If it's not an emergency, they just simply shouldn't be doing it. Thank you,
Liz. Ken, and then Selena.
First of all, I just want to disagree with the fact that this has become a political issue. I don't think politics has played into this issue at all. That's not true for all issues that come before the board, but I don't think this one is falling on political lines at all. I guess my question is now more of a point of order. I don't think it would be remiss to send this policy back to policy committee in order to process some of these questions and bring it back to the board, or some of these points of view, bring it back to the board. To do that, though, we would have to not approve this policy, and then have another vote to move it back to committee. Is that something like that?
I believe we do have a motion on the table that's been seconded.
Right.
So if we voted and the majority said not to approve this policy, then this policy, the policy 5141.3 that is currently on the books would remain on the books, and it would be up to the policy committee to revisit and bring a future re-edit to us.
So I think that's important to note also, is that if we don't approve this policy as written now, the policy that's going to remain on the books does not have this additional required consent provision.
Correct.
Correct.
Correct. We would still have the opt-out policy as opposed to moving to this opt-in, still imperfect policy. So that is one thing that we should weigh is, do we want to approve this and request a further adjustment, or do we want to live with the policy we've had for a while now and also ask the policy committee to bring us another amendment, or do we want to approve this policy? So there's really three different.
And if I can just throw a curve, and Rachel, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is just one portion of the policy that we're amending here. So there's the health assessments required, like all the oral assessments, all those pieces within the policy have changes as well. So in reality, Rachel, you can correct, but we're basically saying no to the entire packet.
Yes, we'd either have the old 5141 1.3 or the new going as of tomorrow.
So then how procedurally would that work if we wanted to definitively revisit this policy? Is there a mechanism to approve it conditional to it being brought back to the board at the next board meeting, or how would that work procedurally?
Procedurally, I don't know if there's a mechanism to do that, Ken, other than to say we approve this change. However, we are asking the policy committee to revisit at the next policy meeting and bring us further revision based on what they heard from us tonight. Selena, and then Tina, and then Rachel.
With all due respect, this is political. All you had to do was look at social media to see how political this became. Parents were stirred up. They didn't need to be stirred up. This is crazy that we're spending this much time on a policy that parents have to opt in. This is political. This is not about the children anymore. I'm not an attorney. Rachel's not an attorney. So for us to go back and write language that parents who are going to get angry no matter what we write are going to feel comfortable with is silly. We've been advised. We can't fathom what might come up because we're not doctors. So we don't know why somebody might need a screening. We don't know. But this policy is supposed to be in there for a reason. And it's to protect kids and parents. So why would we take it out? And why are we arguing about something that parents do not have to sign? They don't have to sign it. We would be arguing if we were forcing the parents to sign it, I could understand. But why are we bothering to rewrite something that nobody is being forced to sign? Like, let's move on. This is just, why go back to the drawing board and rewrite something that parents have the option to sign or not to sign? I mean, Tom, I agree with Tom on this 100% what's happening here.
Thank you, Selena. Tina, and then Rachel.
Mine was more operational. Can we amend the motion? Can we? The second, because it's already second, we can't, right?
We may be able to table to the next meeting.
I mean, it's just a proposal because I can see either ways. And I'm not on the policy committee, so I'll leave it to the policy committee. It was just something I wanted to know operationally.
Rachel, policy committee.
So to Tina's question, I would defer to Attorney Santiago right now to see whether or not we could do that, because I'm not a lawyer. The one question I have, and it's not a point of order, but it is in line with this section right here. And this is honestly for my clarity, and we're a full board right now. So in reviewing these policies before coming to committee, I absolutely reviewed and read the health assessment policy in its entirety, not just the sections to be updated. And in my review and reading of this subsection 7, the language was familiar to me, as it should have been to all of you. Because on 11/22, we had a first read of the student privacy policy as per PPRA. It says it right underneath it. And the words invasive physical examination were in that policy. And then on 12/13, the policy was approved by this board. So why is it a problem now? Why is this language a problem now? Why wasn't it a problem then? I think social media took a turn on this. I'm not on social media, but I did hear it went down a rabbit hole. And I'm sorry that families were alarmed by this language without context. I'm a mother of 3 children. I can absolutely see how without context, this could cause alarm. But I think our common goal right now, this evening, as a board, is to clarify this section for the public and clarify the language so that our community is at ease, knowing the context behind the subsection and just going forward for future years. We have Attorney Santiago right here. So, I mean, it's up to the board. I'm one person, but if we wanted to bring it back to a full board discussion, honestly, I think that would be better because it's just going to go back to policy committee and then we're going to need a lawyer because no one here is happy with the wording.
Thank you and well said. Sean?
Just reiterating that I still don't think this is a second read. I think it's a first read. We have an administration and an attorney who can't explain the genesis or the reason for this language, can't give us an example of how or why this would ever possibly be used. I think this needs to be tabled, reconsidered, and brought back in a much more clear manner.
Thank you, Ken.
I just wanted to say that just to sort of second Rachel there's literally no one that I have seen in my couple years on the board that's more prepared for a policy committee meeting than Rachel. She comes in completely prepared, so she knows. If Rachel says it, I know it to be true. I just wanted to take exception to Selena's point and just clarify that the point of the policy committee is to review the policies. If we were just going to accept the policies as presented by Shipman and Goodwin, as good as they may be, they may not apply to our district. So if the whole point of the policy committee is to take the policies, whether we combine Cave and Shipman and we put it through the lens of Ridgefield Public Schools. If we were just to accept the policies from any particular source, they may not be applicable to us. So the policy committee does play that important role. So that's sort of what we're doing now is fulfilling the board's responsibility after the policy committee has fulfilled their responsibility. So it's an important process, and I think it needs to work through the process, and that's what we're doing right now.
Thanks, Ken. Selena?
It can't work if then we're all trying to do the right thing for the district. And it doesn't work well if then people are being stirred up and it becomes a political bombshell. So we did work on this. We met on this. The whole policy committee met on this. This policy has been in place for since 2015. Members of this board knew this policy was in place. They've been sitting on this board for 2 years while this policy was in place. Didn't matter to them. All of a sudden it's terrible. All of a sudden this is the worst thing that ever happened. But it's been sitting there for 2 years. No, everybody's fine. And now this is a problem. So we did do our job. The policy's been changed. Now parents have to opt in. It's perfect. Now that's a problem. Parents, nobody has to sign this.
Thank you, Selena. Tom, and then Tina, and then I'm going to call and then Amy.
Thank you, Jonathan. So just like, and I think Sean made a good point that nobody can really come up with an example of when this might come into play. Well, I don't think anyone can come up with an example of when this is going to go down the wrong path because some math teacher is performing brain surgery in the bathroom. So I don't see that happening either. I think what we should probably do is use this as an example to show the community that we can all work together, that we're going to cool the environment, ease parents' concerns. So why don't we just go back, talk about it at another meeting, table it for now.
Thanks, Tom. Amy, you had a question, then Tina?
I just wanted to say that as a parent of 4 children and as a board member, I really appreciate the added protection that was added to this policy and the extra editing. I appreciate the fact that you all, legal, that you all heard the concerns from the community that were fair, that reading this was alarming to them, and that you listened to the feedback from the board and you came back with something that added extra protection for the parents. This makes me feel safer. This makes me feel better about the policy, that there's extra protection. This is only going to happen if the parent consents. And that's the bottom line. It's parental consent. So I'm not opposed to what Liz is saying, that maybe we want to talk about it more in the policy committee, whether or not we need it at all. But for me right now, this policy written this way, the entire policy written this way, makes me feel a lot more comfortable than what we have on the books currently. So for me, I would like to move forward and get that extra protection on the books. But that's just my personal.
Thank you. Tina?
So I'm just going to recap. I think as a board, we're 9 members, and the fact that we feel passionately either way just highlights how much concern this was for parents. I agree with almost everybody that has made a comment. I agree with bits and parts. I wish I could take it all and summarize it, but the fact is it was concerning. Parents are affected. I am not going to address it political and not my place, because it will be my personal feeling, and I'm not going to share that because I'm sitting here as a board member representing all children. At least I hope to. The fact is, I agree with Tom. It's concerning, and we could table it, or we could decide to take a vote at this point. Either ways, we have to move forward. I do appreciate the fact that I will keep repeating this. Parents have to opt in. As of now, no child. Unless I give permission, nobody's touching my child. And I think that's something I want to keep going back to, because that was something that was missing in the previous 5 years. I wasn't on the board, so I do not know what happened there. I wish I was like Rachel, could go back years and research. I can. I think they did that fact. I think we're protecting parents. We're giving parents the power. I keep going back to that statement. Parents have the power. If parent chooses not to, they do not need to do this. We're not doing anything. The board is not doing anything. I am comfortable moving forward with that option. Parents have to choose in. However, if the board wants to table it, I think we can take a vote, Jonathan, because I think we're 9 members. We're all feeling passionately about this. I know we still have the budget to get through, and we still have to discuss masks. So I'm trying to be really cognizant. And I do appreciate when Tom said we shouldn't be here for so long. So maybe this is the time to bring it to, we either decide to go forward or we table to for now and come back. But I do appreciate the work that the policy committee has done. I appreciate the fact what Rachel read, that this was done. But I keep repeating, as a parent, I'm a parent, I have a child, and I will have to give my consent before anybody can come to my child. That's my big takeaway. Sorry, I have to summarize. It was 8:30. I'm like, I have to speak.
No, I thank you. I do. I appreciate the work that Rachel and the policy committee put into it. I appreciate the feedback that we received from all the members of the board. This was one of the better conversations that I've been a member of, a party to in my years on the board. I do appreciate that. That said, I do not see a benefit in tabling. I think that's choosing not to do anything because we are just afraid of doing something. I'm more comfortable with the policy as revised than the one on the books now. And we do have a motion on the table. I am going to call a vote. All those in favor of approving policy 5141.3 health assessments as revised in front of us, please raise your hands. That's 7. All those abstaining? All those against? 2. The motion does pass 7-2. However, I do not want this to seem like 7 versus 2. The 2, I understand exactly why you voted the way you did. I do expect that this policy will get further discussion later on in this year. However, we will be going forward with the more protective wording as of now. Thank you all.
Jonathan?
Yes, Ken.
Can I move that we send this policy back to policy committee for review and possible revision?
That request is noted. I think the policy committee is all here and they hear you as well. Do you want to amend the agenda by adding an action item to make that motion? Because we don't usually do that, but we
see.
could.
However it needs to be done, I wanted it to go on the record that the policy committee was going to review the policy again through the lens of the discussions at this meeting. So if me saying that is enough, then I'm good with that.
And I could second that motion if it's a motion.
Do we need a motion? I think everybody here, I think all 9 members want that to occur. So I don't believe we need to amend the agenda. So we do expect to see that back in policy committee and back to the board this year. Okay. Next one up, policy 5125.1 PPRA. This is, I believe, a first read, correct?
This is an edit to a previously adopted policy to reflect the language that we placed in 5141.3. So now the language matches up. So
But this is a first read to the Board of Education. So this we will not be voting on tonight. This would have to be seen a second time per our bylaws before we could approve that edit.
if it is an edit only, I suppose that's correct. Is that right, Rebecca? Now that I have you here. That's correct.
Yes, as I read your bylaw, it states that it has to be considered at 2 regular board meetings. And I don't think that language, that policy has been considered.
5125.1 was not before us last.
So I do think that policy has not been considered. Although the language is identical, the language was considered because it mirrors the other one, but that policy was not. So I would say you're right. It's a first read.
So we'll see this one back at our next regular board meeting to vote on as a second read,
Okay,
the edit.
got it. So that'll come
Okay.
back on the 28th.
Yes.
Okay,
And last policy for tonight, policy 6142.101 wellness. This is a second read. Do I have a motion?
I move that the Board of Education approve policy 6142.101 wellness.
Thank you, Rachel. Do I have a second? Ken, thank you. Questions or comments on this policy? There being none, all those in favor of approving policy 6142.101 wellness, please raise your hands. That's unanimous. Thank you all. And moving to discussion item on recommendations from DPH, Governor, and CSDE. This is around
Good night, all.
Governor.
Rebecca.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you,
This is
Rebecca.
around Governor Lamont's move to cut off the mask mandate for the end of this month. I do want to just point out to, not to this board who already knows, but to the members of the public, that the Board of Education does not have a policy around masks. We've been following guidance from the health department, and we do have a COVID-19 temporary policy, which does state that operational procedures in health do reside with the administration. That said, Dr. De Silva, you want to take us through the discussion?
Sure. So I do have Aaron and Ed Briggs joining me tonight, and I will lean in on them if I need to, but let me just start off. As everyone, I feel like now knows that last week, Governor Lamont recommended lifting the mask mandate as of February 28th. On that same at that same press release, the Commissioner of the Department of Public Health, Dr. Juthani, agreed with Governor Lamont in recommending to lift the mask mandate as of February 28th. The Commissioner of Education at that same press conference also agreed that in the recommendation that Governor Lamont made to lift the mask mandate as of February 28th. That said, all we have received thus far from the State Department of Ed and the department, and actually just the State Department of Ed, has been that the mask mandate had to stay in effect originally until at least February 15th and or possibly the 28th. That's all we received. Last week, we normally have a call on Tuesdays with the Department of Public Health. They didn't have that call on Tuesday, so they'll actually have that call tomorrow, and Aaron will be on that call. I'll be joining Tina on strategic planning at the same time, maybe trying to multitask if I'm able. However, as of right now, we have not received additional guidance. That said, as this board knows, we have followed since the start the recommendations and or requirements from the Department of Public Health and or the State Department of Education. That's been since the start. Regardless of the climate, regardless of opinions, we felt that it was in the district's best interest to follow whatever requirements or recommendations they were provided to us. That said, we too would then lift the mask mandate for RPS as of February 28th. So I'll repeat that. If from the onset of the pandemic, we have followed the recommendations of the Department of Public Health and or the requirements from the governor and or the Department of Public Health and or the State Department of Ed, given that all three, including, by the way, the Fran Rubinowitz, who represents the Connecticut Association of Superintendents, RPS would too lift the mask mandate as of February 28th. I'd like to offer a little bit of additional context. Right now, if you follow along with Aaron's daily emails, you'll notice that cases in our schools continue to decline daily. Sometimes they go up a couple, sometimes they go down, but generally speaking, they're declining. Our vaccination rates right now, over 95% of our faculty are vaccinated, many of which, if not all, are boosted. Our students ages 12 and up, and the numbers are slightly lower in terms of second shots, but we're about 87% of our students between the ages 12 and up. Our under 12, 5 to 11, we're at about 57%. That's students or children with their first shot, a little bit lower for those that didn't get their second shot as of right now. So overall, we have high vaccination rates here in Ridgefield. We have low number of cases in schools. We met when that decision to lift the mask mandate. As you know, we don't do it in isolation. We met with Ed, who I think is here. We met with Ed, Dr. Ahern. This is our local health committee. Aaron and our small team, Dr. Hanaway, Karen Dewing. We follow their data and the recommendations since the start. We meet weekly. It was no different this time. That said, in addition, to provide further context, this Friday, and often during the pandemic, we either met every week Fridays or every other. I met with the town task force. That town task force includes the first selectman. It includes a physician from Sanford Hospital. This week, it actually included the head of school, Ridgefield Academy and St. Mary's, Dick Ahrens, Rick Lawrence, who has been providing the town with their data. I probably missed somebody, the chief of police, chief of fire, emergency response folks. I provided them with the same information that I'm providing you all, asked them for feedback if there was anything that I should know to be able to provide that to the Board of Education. And the town task force is in agreement that as of February 28th, we would lift the mask mandate, same areas doing the same, Ridgefield Academy doing the same, given that that is where the Department of Public Health and the State Department are landing. I'm trying to see if I missed anything. Oh, I know I missed a big thing. As I mentioned, the Department of Public Health has not provided us with any further guidance. We're expecting some guidance. Hopefully we'll hear about it tomorrow. In terms of metrics, which I think is the natural question that some folks may ask, they haven't provided that to us. I don't know if this is an accurate statement, but from what I understand, I don't believe we're going to get metrics other than perhaps hospitalizations. That's what I've heard. So I don't know that we're going to get anything more that's going to say, okay, yes, with this number, this and this number, that. Our hope is that when we receive the guidance, that guidance is going to inform us on a few things. Right now, children do need to continue to wear masks on school buses. I think that's a federal law, or at least it's a federal mandate, perhaps. So children will have to, regardless of February 28th, they'll have to continue to wear masks on the school buses. We do not know what the implications will be for quarantine or contact tracing or students who are exposed and need to come to school or are able to come to school days 6 through 10 and what that will look like. So that information we've not received. And I think that this board knows, and I know that our families can expect that we will have to figure out some things operationally, right? What does this look like for kids? So when some children come to school with their masks on and others don't, how do we communicate with one another? What does choice look like for adults and for kids? How do we communicate in respectful ways and kind ways? That's the work that will happen with our administrators in support of our kids in developmentally appropriate ways. We know that looks one way for kindergartners and a very different way for 11th graders. So parents can expect that we'll begin to operationalize that. As I said, hopefully we will receive guidance, but as of right now, that's the information that I have and I'm sharing with you. Ed, who is patiently on this call, his screen is now black, but Ed or Aaron, what did I miss, if anything?
I think you covered everything. I'm unable to get my video to work on my laptop, but I think you basically covered everything. You were right when they said we don't know what's going to happen with the quarantine, whether they're going to go back from the 5 days to 10 days. The Commissioner of Health did state she's not going to give out any metrics. If metrics are used, they're probably going to be hospitalizations. That's basically it.
Aaron, did I?
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. De Silva. I'm in full agreement with that. I think you covered everything. One point to note, I believe the legislature did approve several of the governor's emergency orders going forward, which would give the Commissioner of Education the power to reinstate a statewide mask mandate if at some point she chose or thought that it was necessary to do so. All indications are, however, at this time that she is in agreement with the governor that on February 28th, the mask mandate will effectively be over for the state of Connecticut.
All right, so Ed and Aaron, if you can hang on a little bit longer, and Jonathan, it looks like some folks have questions, and we'll do our best to answer them. And just recognizing that there are some things that we can't answer yet because we haven't received information. Really, for the number of families that are listening, what you all received is actually what we received. So as of right now, the communication that our families or anyone that was tuning into the governor's press conference is really what we've received. So I'm hopeful that there'll be more information before we can leave for break so that we can start operationalizing this, knowing that families and kids are going to be expecting some communication before they return after holiday.
Okay, let's open it up to questions. I see Amy first and then Celine.
Dr. De Silva, I'm just wondering if you could, I heard you speak about K through 12, and I'm just wondering if you could speak a little bit about the preschool and maybe
Sure.
what information you looked at to decide that, and if you're in fact lifting the mask mandate for the preschool as well.
So preschool would be included in the lifting of the mask mandate. That said, so childcare centers, for example, Cadence Academy wouldn't follow those same rules. So they operate under a childcare settings, and certainly Ed could speak to that. I can't, but our preschool through 12 would be included. That said, important to note, Amy, is that our preschool students are, with all due respect to them, are the ones that are the least compliant with the masks. And we could probably all figure out why that is. And that's just because they're little and they shift them and they move them and they can't keep them above their nose. But they would be included in this particular case with the mask mandate lift. Yes. And I think there's just, it should be supposed that when we're lifting the mask mandate, that means choice, right? So families can elect to do whatever's comfortable for them. And by the way, there may be an ebb and flow to that, right? A parent can elect to maybe start off without a mask and then feeling more comfortable and putting a mask on, if that's what their family elects to do. Also, just as another aside, we will be carefully looking at the number of cases in our community. And if we have to communicate again, we will. So that's data that we'll be continuing to collect.
Elena, you're next.
So just to clarify, the Department of Public Health, they weren't necessarily recommending that all, I watched the press conference too, and as you know, I'm pretty involved in all of this. They didn't recommend unmasking they recommended giving the power back to the localities and letting the localities decide for themselves what they wanted to do. So it wasn't like they told the towns unmasked. They felt like the towns would be smart enough to gauge whether or not they had high enough vaccination rates, what their case numbers were. So that being said, what are our vaccination rates, Ed? I can't see Ed.
Well,
Okay.
What are our vaccination rates in the elementary schools right now for the kids?
between the age of 5 to 11, we're at 57.1%. From 12 to 17, we're at almost 90%, 89.1%.
That's awesome in the high school. And our new cases are going down, yes?
New cases in schools are going down. The number of new cases in town last week, last 2 week was 7 and 2 cases reported. We're at a case rate of 18.9%, and we're at a test positivity rate of 4.5%. Realizing that with the addition of home test kits, that could be skewed a little bit.
Selena, you bring up a good point that I should mention. Not every school district, based on their vaccination status, is necessarily going to lift the mask mandate on the 28th. I think there are some school districts, and I won't speak for them all because I don't know how well they've communicated with their own communities yet. But I think those school districts that are struggling with vaccination or are larger may hold on a little bit longer. So you're absolutely right that decision to leave it locally and using the factors that make sense for their community is certainly that I think it certainly is a variable for some, without a doubt.
Do you know our teachers' vaccination rates? Or
Yeah,
are they?
I thought I said this, but maybe I didn't. It's over 95%. So we have over 95% of our faculty that is double vaccinated, and vast majority are boosted. And then you heard Ed repeat the student vaccination rate. So we're in a very good place with respect to vaccination.
The high school's definitely at a very good place, for
Right.
sure. I am concerned about the younger children, for sure. I am. The high school.
And just as an aside, we did offer a partnership with Griffin Hospital here, and I think we really maximized the clinic. And I think at that point there wasn't. I think the invitation was open, and we weren't getting folks that wanted to sign up. So that could certainly evolve and change. But as of right now, I think we've maximized that in terms of having it here.
And that's happening in a lot of communities across the state where you're getting that age group not running to get these vaccinations.
Questions from other board members? Tina.
Sorry. I just wanted to highlight, I think it's since the start of the pandemic, we have trusted the administration and the COVID task force and the people who are experts to make these decisions. So far, knock on wood, we have done okay. I mean, it's great to hear the vaccination rates. I had a feeling we were really high. I think I do appreciate the fact that so much is unknown right now. But I also respect the fact that we are doing due diligence and it's not our decision. I think I'm really uncomfortable with that because we're not experts. So we need to listen to the experts. And if that includes the COVID task force, Dr. Aaron, whoever have been part of this decision, the cohesive unit, if you will. As we move forward, maybe there are a few questions that do concern me. I know there are parents who have younger kids who probably cannot get the vaccine, who may be immunosuppressed or whatever. I think that'll be a question that'll come up from those parents, kids who are younger in age. Also, as we move forward through this, will we be looking at infection rates? Is this something we will keep an eye on?
Yeah, I think, Tina, that guidance that we hope to receive from the Department of Public Health, I think will make a big difference in terms of our decision making. As you said it best. I know that I'm not a public health official. And so when it comes to ensuring that the people that do have the background and or the expertise are helping in the decision-making process. We'll continue to lean in on those folks. So I'm hopeful that tomorrow we'll gain some further insight. It may not be here for families to know. It may not be here for the 28th. What we do hope to have for the 28th and when students return, should all things continue down the path that we heard last week, is some type of support for our students and helping them understand, because it's a big shift, right? Especially for the little kids. They've had masks on for 1.5 to 2 years, and all of a sudden some are going to be able to have it off. Some people are not going to be able to have it off. What does that feel like? How do we communicate that? All of that, whatever we can do to operationalize it for children by that 28th, we will do. Some of the details, families are going to need to be patient, because what we wouldn't want to do, and I've said all along, we don't want to have to backtrack. So as soon as the Department of Public Health gives us guidance, our families will be able to, we'll hear it from us.
Thank you, Selena. Tina, you have another?
So just to be clear though, I'm sorry, but so you've already made the decision though, even though the Department of Health, they haven't given you guidelines, but they're giving it back to the municipalities, the power, thinking that we're going to make a good decision. But so today you think that the vaccination rates are high based on that everything's okay based on what Rick Lawrence and Ed Briggs said, that our case rates and the number of new cases and the vaccination rates are all, that we're all okay to unmask everybody. So that's what you've heard from Ed Briggs and Rick Lawrence. I just want to be clear, because I want to make sure that everything, all the information is based on the science, not just arbitrarily unmasking everybody.
So Selena, yeah, you bring up a couple of questions. So our task force, our steering committee is Ed Briggs, Dr. Ahern, Aaron, Dr. Hanaway, Karen Dewing, and myself. Those are the individuals that have met weekly for 1.5 years. The guidance in which we've worked under has been the guidance that we have received from the Department of Public Health and or the State Department of Ed.
Right, I know that.
That has been our driving force. When it comes to the decision making that we've made, it's been based on the Department of Public Health's guidance, and at times we've had to make different decisions based on local data. There was a time that we had to close one of our schools 1.5 weeks earlier than the other schools for holiday break because of what we were noticing in school. But that was done again in collaboration with the Department of Public Health. In terms of the data that we have here in town, I'll let Ed speak to that in terms of whether or not that's enough, I think is your question, or good data. But our vaccination rates are good. And we're very fortunate to have them as high as we do. But Ed, you can speak to that if you want.
Yeah, the vaccination rates are pretty high. I don't think we're going to get much better than this. The rates of infection are coming down significantly. The state is not going to magically give us a number, a matrix number saying, well, at this point, you can lift all mask recommendations. That's not going to happen. They already said they're not going to give us a matrix number. An action level, if you want to call it. If we don't get rid of the masks at this point, then when are we going to get rid of the masks? It's been 2 years now. There's been that deleterious effects to children. And I think we have to start moving forward. This is becoming an endemic. We have to learn to live with this. And it's important we move on.
Okay, so I just wanted to know.
If I have a question, sorry, can I just jump in with a question? Assuming the DPH does not come forward with any sort of metrics, will we here in-house in Ridgefield develop our own metrics to know when, if there is any rationale or reason or number that would say masks go back on?
We would be in constant consultation with Aaron and Susie and Dr. Ahern and myself to go over the numbers. And if we see something we feel that would be detrimental to the school, we would take some kind of action.
Do you know what that would be?
We would have to, close some classrooms.
No,
We
I'm sorry,
don't,
do you know what would be concerning? What number would you be looking at, and what would be the break point?
when the classroom can't function, if a classroom can't function for some reason, there's enough kids out where, either the teachers are out or the classroom, a good portion of them out, just like we did in the past. That's what we've done in the past.
Tina?
So so if I'm understanding this correct, we will look at rate of attendance or absenteeism, like if we have a bunch of students
That's
getting,
correct.
okay. So, all right.
Just like we would with a flu, okay? If we start seeing greater than a 20% rate with a flu, and you have an absence of teachers and the school's not able to operate, you consider, shutting down parts of the school.
Understand. Thank you, Ed.
Other board questions? Selena?
So you're not basing it on the metrics then if you put the mask back on, it's how many kids get sick with this. So like 20% if 20% got COVID, then you would consider putting the mask back on. Aaron, I want to speak to you a minute. Are you comfortable with these numbers? Do you have any metrics you might be able to provide? Because I feel comfortable at the high school, but I don't feel comfortable what I'm hearing right now, because now what I'm hearing is not that it's based on science. I'm hearing that it's based on just get the damn mask off. And I think there's a lot of parents who totally, if it's time to get the mask off because it's safe, yay, let's do it. But if it's just time to get the mask off because it's time to get the mask off, not okay.
Well, I take exception to that. I mean, I've been doing this for 42 years. And if I feel we're putting the kids at any risk, it's going to be addressed. So, I don't make political decisions, and Susie knows that. If I feel that it's safe and it's an appropriate time for the mask to be removed, then I'll suggest that. And so would Dr. Ahern. He and I often agree with things.
There's another piece to this, Selena, and I know you want to hear from Aaron. So Aaron, you unmuted yourself, so I'll turn it over to you in 1 second. This is, while we do have a local committee here, the Department of Public Health has been accessible to us all along the way. And so whether that's our weekly meetings or whether that's a one-on-one, which we've had to do on a couple of occasions here early on in the pandemic, we have access to the Department of Public Health, as does Ed, as does Aaron, all of us do. And so when there's questions around trends that we might be seeing in school, and we are lucky enough to have a small enough community, we're in touch every single day and some touch point, whether that's with Ed or Dr. Ahern or Aaron or myself, where we can look at trends in a classroom or look at trends within a school and identify if there's an area that we need to be getting more advice on, right? Whether that's me saying, why do we have 7 cases in one first grade? Or us saying we have 7 cases across a school, should the process or the action steps look different? So while the Department of Public Health is not anticipated to give us metrics per se to use, that doesn't mean that we can't be looking at trends or patterns that we're seeing in our classrooms or our school, and it would be irresponsible for us not to do that. Our hope, though, is that there's some guidance that we receive that can be common across every community, right? So that we're not just making decisions arbitrarily, but rather something from the DPH that says, okay, this is what school districts should be looking at when making decisions. Whether or not that actually comes or not, Selena, I'm not sure. As I said, I think what we've heard, and Ed repeated what I've heard, which is that they're looking at the hospitalization rate. And as of my meeting on Friday, what I heard, at least from Stanford, is little or no cases, nothing to be concerned with at this point. And so based on the data that we're hearing, again, the Department of Public Health, in my opinion, and this is my opinion, Susie, who's not in the health world, but I would hope that if they believe that masks were important at this point, that they would mandate them. And in absence of them mandating them, then we're left to make local decisions. And when we're making local decisions, we are looking at the criteria that I just shared with you, which is trends that we're seeing in our schools, vaccination rates, and then again, our team coming together and looking at other communities that are in a similar situation. There very well may be, and it's likely that you're going to hear that some communities at least may hold down a week or two after the 28th. I can't speak for those communities. I don't know what that situation will be like should the mask mandate be lifted, but their data may look different. Their community, their population is different. So this is the situation that we're in now. And then Aaron, I'll turn it over to you if you wanted to add anything to that.
Sure. We are not telling anyone that they're not allowed to wear a mask. So any child that would like to come to school and wear a KN95 or surgical mask or N95 mask, or any staff member may also do so. Our case rates in town are low. Our vaccination rates are high. Folks who would like to receive the vaccine have the opportunity to do so. I've really enjoyed working with this group, Dr. Hearn, Ed Briggs. We've always had robust conversations and discussions. At the end of the day, we always come out in favor of the students and what's best for our staff and our kids. And I am in agreement. We've always followed what the Department of Public Health has recommended all the way through. And at this stage of the game, the DPH is not mandating or recommending that masks are necessary in localities any longer going forward. At this stage, if we had a new variant that came up, the commissioner does have the power to reinstate a statewide mask mandate. At this stage, she is not anticipated to do that.
I need to reiterate, because we are being misleading here. And again, I'm not saying if the science says unmask for each community, but the DPH did not say that they were recommending unmasking. What they said, saw the press conference. We are handing the power back to the localities because some towns have very high vaccination rates. That was the thinking. And some towns have very little infections. So that is why they did not say we are recommending unmasking. To say that is very misleading. We need the town to know that. So again, it might be time, but 57% that's a low vaccination rate. So
Selena, your statement's correct. They're recommending that the mask mandate be lifted as of February 28th and be given to towns to make that decision, to make it local, right? And you also are correct in saying that they asked us to look, or they suggested looking at vaccination rates and rates of infection. For us, for Ridgefield, both of those situations right now are good news. And that's why we feel comfortable following the recommendation that you just stated. You're right, 100%, that they've recommended lifting the mask mandate and giving it to local school districts or superintendents to make the decision. As a result, our team came together. We looked at all of the data that you just suggested, and we felt comfortable supporting that recommendation. Moreover, I did bring it to our town task force for feedback, insights, anything that I could have perhaps not understood that they might have wanted to give me insight on. And collectively, there was an agreement that the mask mandate in Ridgefield would be lifted.
John?
Yeah, I just kind of want to go back to the beginning on why we did all this in the first place. This was to keep the hospitals from being overwhelmed, which they're currently not. This was to keep case rates down, which they're going down. It was not so nobody ever gets sick from anything ever again. And let's all remember, putting masks on kids for 7 hours a day, 5 days a week is not a zero-sum game. There is a mental health component to that everybody on this board and everybody in this town has seen. Suicide rates have tripled. They're way higher than COVID death rates for 0 through 19, which since the beginning of the pandemic, a total of 7. That's with COVID, not from COVID. So we've done damage to our kids, and we're seeing it in learning loss. We're seeing it in other places. We need to reconcile that with the public health policy. This is not a zero-sum game.
Thank you. Anyone else? Tina?
All right, I'm just going to go back and wrap this up as best as I can. Since the start of the pandemic, we made a policy in May 24, 2021, in which we agreed as a board that we are not experts. The superintendent is who we give the power, who will consult based on guidance with the local experts who know our town, who know the intricacies of our school, and will counsel the super. So for 2 years now, almost 2 years, from 2021, almost a year, we have listened to those people, the COVID task force, our internal task force, make guidance to us. Am I right on that, Dr. De Silva, right? We have listened to you. You have told us when schools needed to be shut, when we needed to be careful, kids quarantine, whatever. We have listened to them. And I appreciate Selena's point. It was given back to the districts to make a decision whether to unmask or not. To reiterate this point, as of now, as the data stands, our local COVID task force, our local group, our Ed Briggs, all that group, I won't name everybody because I'll forget somebody, but everyone that Dr. De Silva named have said that it is okay for our kids to unmask as of now. We are waiting for more guidance. We will need that. Look, I'll be very honest. I was paranoid. I still haven't seen my mother in 2 years. I'm trying to keep my personal feelings off this. I'm trying to understand that as we have a role as a board. We gave our superintendent that job to do, and we have to trust this process. We just went through that with the policy. So I will keep going back to that. We need to be sure that we're going to do, our superintendent, our teachers, our COVID task force is going to do the best for our kids. I cannot make that decision. I'm not an epidemiologist. I keep, my cousins are, my mom is. Again, I cannot even listen to them because they have different data points. So I'm hopeful that we will keep a track on this. If infections rate rise, we can come back to this. I want to keep going back to that. We have to move forward. I appreciate that fact. This is a total aside. I'm really proud of how high our vaccination rates are for our high school kids. It's nice to know. And I do appreciate that our younger kids are a lower number, but again, that's not my choice to make. It's a parent choice.
And to be clear, Tina, I'm sure that this board didn't always agree in the past 1.5 to 2 years on whether or not we should have been following the DPH or we should have been, all of that. But the reality is we did. It served us well. We can't pick or choose when we are going to follow or not going to follow. And we followed all along. Again, should something change, you'll hear from us again. And I think that we've been as transparent as we possibly can with our parent community. It's important that the Board of Education obviously discuss the things that you want us to think about. And Selena, to your point, vaccination rates and hospitalizations and trends, those are things that you can expect that we'll continue to review. It doesn't just stop as of February 28th. I hope that you wouldn't believe that would happen that way. But that's where we are.
Thank you, Dr. Silva. Anything else before we move on to budget? Selena?
So Ed, just to clarify, Ed and Aaron, 57% is, you think that's a good, safe vaccination rate?
For that age range, yes. I don't think you're going to get too much better than that. We're pushing for smaller kids to get vaccinated, but there's some resistance to it. And we're finding that throughout the schools. One thing, Dr. Mahood, who is an infectious disease doctor, is also on our COVID task force. He reviews all the hospitalization rates, vaccination rates, and he also concurred that we should lift the mask policy. And that's his specialty, infectious diseases.
I was just confirming that you thought 57% was high, was good. You think that's good?
Yes.
Okay.
For that age group, it is. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else before we move on to the budget? Go ahead, Dr. De Silva.
I was just going to say, to clarify, Ed, what you're saying is relative to other communities, for that for that age group, that vaccination rate is what you would expect to see in relation.
Right. We're up there with Darien and New Canaan, and they're also lifting the mask mandate. So the ones with the highest vaccination rates are going that way.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else? Thank you very much, all of you, for the update on that. And we can move on to adoption of the Board of Education's budget. Before we take a motion, so just the way this will work, First, Dr. De Silva will bring us through her memorandum with some adjustments since the last we spoke. Then I'll ask for a motion to approve the budget. While that motion is on the table, any member of the Board of Education can make a motion to amend, either by amending to add or to subtract something from the budget. The amendment will then be voted on and either fail or become part of the original motion. Dr. De Silva, you want to bring us through the changes
Sure.
from the last time we met?
So everyone should have a memo. What this board asked me to do was to specifically look at the athletics department. It felt that percentage, the board felt, generally speaking, that it was out of line in relation to the rest of the board, the superintendent's proposed budget. So what you're going to notice, and it's a little bit of a balancing act. I know pay to participate is an important piece that this board has been looking at in terms of reducing the cost to families, while at the same time, when it comes time to budget, it's always one of those topics that we feel like, okay, let's put it back in. So we balance that a little bit. So what you're going to notice is there's three amounts, 14,000, 7,500, and 6,500. Those are actually paid to participate fees, but not all of it. So that's just coming from the weight room fees that kids pay for also. So there's a reduction there. There's an additional $10,000 that we're reducing in equipment, and that's the shot clock. You might remember that. That was an extra purchase that Dane put in. That actually doesn't need to be purchased until 2023. He's actually maybe hoping that Parks and Rec will partner with him before then, but just because of the supply shortage, that's one of the reasons that it's in the budget this year. So we did remove that from the budget. You'll see some reductions in what we originally budgeted in the general service budget. These are firm numbers now. So you'll see a small reduction to insurance liability, a stronger reduction in the workman's comp insurance. This was from what we originally budgeted. Further liability reductions in the facilities budget, OPEB in the general services budget. And then there was just a small change from our original proposed budget at Barlow for music materials that was budgeted differently. So as a result of those shifts, you'll notice that the proposed budget went from a 4.98 to a 4.79. Just something else I want to bring to your attention, Sean, if you're listening. We did get our final number on the insurance, and thankfully we didn't go lower than 3% because that's the number we got. So we are at max there. So it is 3%. So we were not able to obtain any additional savings. I guess that was for you too, Ken. Any additional savings there, but we did go down from originally we had in the budget 4%. We went down to 3%. Dawn had actually hoped to go down a little bit lower. Anxious Susie didn't let her, and this time I'm glad I didn't. So we're at 3%. That number came in as a final number on Friday. So when we do go to our Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance, they'll feel comfortable that our budget number is our budget number. So now the superintendent's proposed budget is a 4.79% increase over the current budget.
Thank you, Dr. De Silva. Do I have a motion? We'll come to the discussions in a minute, Selena.
Sorry. I move that the Board of Education approve the superintendent's proposed 2022-23 Ridgefield Public Schools operating budget totaling $107,159,322, a 4.79% increase over the current budget.
Thank you, Rachel. Do I have a second before we move? Ken, was that a second?
Second, yes, sir. Sorry.
Ken seconds. Thank you. Now discussion. Selena, you had your hand raised?
Selena, you're on mute.
I wanted to ask if we have to vote on this tonight. I watched the meeting from last year where the art program was discussed. And 2 art teachers will cost approximately $154,000. I also watched the little clip that the parent was shown. So I've been following the whole process of, what's happening with art. Students are losing out on 10 lessons of art a year, which means, I guess, this has been going on now for 4 years. So that's 40 lessons that they've lost out on, some kids. That's 7.5 hours you said per year. That's what you said last meeting. I'm thinking if this was math or English, people would be going crazy right now. And a lot of parents are very, very upset about it. We have these pathways. We have pathways for athletes. We have pathways for musicians. We have pathways for singers, but we have no pathways for these artists, none. There's a first grader who's was in first grade. And if we wait another year, they will have had no art. They get art one time in 6 days. That's crazy. They can't wait another year. We're just kicking this can down the road, and we have a million excuses, but they're just excuses. And that's all they are. We can have 2 teachers helping us with a new curriculum and still be giving these kids art. We can do it simultaneously. We really can. We can tweak the budget and we can fit these teachers in. We talk about social emotional health, and Christine Stang, a professor of neuroscience at the University of Alabama in Birmingham, I've got to put my glasses on to read this, but I did a lot of research on this. She was former president also of the American Art Therapy Association, says creativity in and itself is important for remaining healthy and remaining connected to yourself and connected to the world. It reduces stress, improves focus, and helps to process emotions by improving self-understanding and being cathartic. It also improves communication skills. And we keep giving lip service to all of this stuff, but we're not doing anything for our kids. And there's so much money in the budget for administration purposes, but it doesn't trickle down to the classroom. And we talk about following the science behind masks, but we're not following the science behind art. So I don't want to vote on this budget without getting these art teachers in the budget. I feel like it's so important to these kids. I'm standing here. This is why all my kids, they had this wonderful experience. Look at that, all of that. And we have these little kids and they've had none of it. It seems so unfair. And what about the kids who they're so maybe poor, because 22% of the town now lives either in poverty or on the Alice threshold. And all they have is art, right? Because maybe they can't afford to take like a class outside of Ridgefield, and we won't even give them that. We won't give them that because we've got to process everything. We've got to go back to the drawing field. And it's just excuses. So I'd really like it if we could just hold off voting on this and maybe just squeeze in some art for our kids. I really think we should try to do that. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. The motion is on the table. We do have the opportunity, like I discussed, to make a motion to amend the budget as we see by making that addition. Is that something that you would like to do? Or anyone else at the table would like to make a motion to amend? Tina?
I am curious that Selena mentions that children in first grade don't get art. Did I miss that?
No, I said they get it once every 6 days. They get it once every 6 days.
Okay, so just in the matter, because of the context, can we add the art teachers and how much would that come? How much would that raise the budget?
154,000. I asked to tweak the budget. I didn't say just put, because I am sensitive. I don't agree with anything that Liz and Sean say most of the time, but I do agree when they're like, we can't just raise everybody's taxes all the time and just expect them to absorb it. Like you can't have everything, you know? I mean, and I would give everything. I mean, the budget's wonderful. I mean, I can tell everybody puts so much thought into it, but sometimes, you know, you do have to be sensitive to these taxpayers too. So I know we're going to send this to the Board of Finance and they're going to chop it up. So I'm very sensitive to everything, all the work everybody did. I mean, it's amazing what you all do. I mean, the district worked so hard, but I really did. I think it was Liz who mentioned that there's a lot of administrative cost in this budget. And I really feel like more of that money should be, and Liz, I'm sorry, that wasn't a big cut. I agree with more than just a little bit, sorry, but there really should be more money directly in the classroom. And I think it was Liz that said that actually. We need that. Kids need to be impacted directly. And I don't know if that means maybe the math coach goes this time, and maybe half of an elementary supervisor, but there's money we have money to play around with.
To your point, can I ask Dr. De Silva or Corey to address this? Because I do understand the concerns about art. And I think it befits us to have this conversation. And I also want to highlight, because I have been part of this for so many years, we have, correct me if I'm wrong, 6 superintendents have brought forth this process of reduction in an art teacher. And I'm just trying to understand why it doesn't match up. Does that make sense as a parent? Why does it feel like there is less art, and why superintendents have bought it? And I think it's a conversation that we need to have. Maybe very quickly, I am very cognizant that it's 9:30 on Valentine's Day.
From the administration is a good idea.
Sure. I'm not sure that this one could be quick, but we'll do our best. I just want to clarify one point, though. The art teachers haven't been gone for 4 years. We made a reduction in art a year and a half ago when I came on. So just a little bit over a year and a half ago. That was the time in which they were cut. We added an art teacher last year. So we went from 6 to 3. I'm going to be clear, that's all we actually needed was 3, but the board wanted additional time for extra programming. So we added an art teacher in. They wanted extra time for materials planning. So we added that extra art teacher in. It was not necessary in terms of student contact time, but there was an argument that they needed additional material management time. I think that's what it was described. Yes, Tina, I think that there were probably 4 permanent superintendents, probably 6 or 7 if you included, and I could assure you that any superintendent after me is going to be arguing the same thing. The reality is that there's a misperception, I think, about the time in the classroom and what a cultural arts experience looks like. I'll turn it over to Corey Gillette because I know she's been working very hard, K-12. The one thing that I think is really, really important that we not miss is that when you speak about art, it can't just be elementary. When we look at curriculum and instruction, we look K-12 or pre-K-12. Also, just a point of clarification, in our schools, all of our schools that have RISE receive art, unless those RISE students are in a traditional or receiving art from their general class, which sometimes that's absolutely the case. We have Art Leap in all of our schools. That was not consistent when we had 6 art teachers. It is now consistent. We now have consistent programming across our 6 schools. We did not have consistent programming when we had 6 art teachers. But I'll turn it over to Corey, who can talk a little bit about the work and where it's going.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. So in reflection, in my new position here, one of the things that I've been thinking about recently is how we could have brought up all the work that we're doing in the K-12 art program since I've been here. I've mentioned it here and there, but we really haven't brought it all to the forefront because we haven't been able to wrap it up in a bow quite the way we were with, say, the music department and the work that we've done with that group. Because we are doing a needs assessment of the K-12 art program, and we are not looking for going backwards. We are looking for moving forward and creating a comprehensive art program with clear pathways from K to 12. And that just doesn't impact the actual art teacher time, but that impacts the student's entire experience in school, especially at the elementary school level, where art beautifully integrates across the curriculum and integrates into the community and into the partnerships that we look to build and strengthen and further develop to create a program that is comprehensive for kids. So as we have done needs analysis and looked at those pathways, there are a lot of areas that we want to grow. And we are working towards those areas. We're looking at the high school where our students who get choice and voice in what they want to take for electives and where they concentrate, what we're noticing is that they are not choosing art, that they've been choosing the sciences and that they've been going for the STEM courses. That is a big discussion for us because that is not okay. We want all our students to have clear pathways, but we also want our art students who see themselves as artists, especially at a young age, that they can see those pathways and those possibilities for themselves, and that there's a comprehensive, I keep saying comprehensive because it's not just one lane, opportunity for them, so that our art programming at the high school doesn't continue to shrink. So we are in the process of doing that work. And the other thing, honestly, we were asked to bring a budget to the Board of Ed that was responsible. We spent hours and hours going through every single digital tool. We didn't want to ask for anything more than what we needed. And adding 2 more art teachers does not give us all of the ways that we can support kids in art across the day. That creates a situation for us where we have art teachers who have huge chunks of their day open. That is not maximizing an art program for our students. We're looking for partnerships. We're looking for artists in residence. We will have an ask. We do need to have conversations, perhaps at the high school, about bringing the art requirement back for graduation. That's what we're starting to look at. Art is important in this community. And I've been lucky the last week to talk to a bunch of parents who have a lot of expertise to add to this conversation. And I feel like we're very aligned in our passion for this and in the ways that we can work together to develop this kind of programming. So if we had felt like that this was the answer to really making our art experience and RPS everything that we think kids deserve, we would have asked for it. And just as we've done needs assessments across all of our departments, we would have asked. We have plans. We should have communicated our plans, done presentations, been clear about that, and that I can reflect on. But this was not our ask, and we feel like that we can do even more moving forward.
Thank you. Tom, you had your hand up? And then Ken.
Yes, thank you, Jonathan. I just had a quick question. In the elementary schools currently, how does the frequency for art compare to music and PE?
Want me to jump, Corey, or?
Sure.
Okay. So currently, our children in art our children experience art once every 6 days. Our children in music, it's a little bit different, and it's just something that folks had to remember. We have a general music teacher that teaches general music, like a general music class, that's once every 6 days as well. In addition, that general music teacher also teaches chorus and also teaches band. Separately, we have an orchestra teacher that travels between 3 schools, but the general music teacher teaches general music, chorus, band, which also comes with lessons, right? Moreover, Tom, there's another piece, is that because there might still be a gap, extra time, we have within a semester, the music teacher will pick up half the school for 1 extra session, and then the other semester, another session. So each semester, 3 grade levels will pick up an extra session of music, and then another 3 grade levels will pick another session up of music. For physical education, the recommended number of minutes for PE is 150 for 5 days in elementary school. That's from SHAPE. We actually are under that we're only at 90 minutes every 6 days. So it's 2 different sessions, but it's every 6 days we teach 90 minutes. So we're under the 150 recommended. And I don't know if you want to talk about library, but that's another layer of what we call essentials, where children receive 1 library session every 6 days. But the library media specialist is also responsible for integrating into the content areas with gen ed teachers, also responsible for the technology. So they're library media providers. They're also responsible for the STEM and the maker spaces. And the hub is open. The library is a hub. It's open all day. So kids come in through traditional book checkouts. You might remember when they all line up and come and check out their book. But then there's the non-traditional book checkout, where the kid is reading, 3 books a week and is back into the library picking out books and is getting guided by their library media specialist. And then again, you have guest authors and all those things because it's the hub of the school. But traditionally, it's a formal, like what you might remember as library session every 6 days, but then there's the integration into the content areas, whether that's keyboarding or the technology skills that kids need.
I just wanted to add a couple things, Susie. So one thing that's important to know is that Art Leap is what we're looking to grow. So Art Leap really mirrors a student who chooses to play an instrument in music. Art Leap is when students have the opportunity, the choice to engage in additional art outside of the art class. That wasn't consistent before, and from what I've heard, it was invitation only. So we've worked on expanding that, and we want to expand that even further so that students that are interested in art not only have opportunities at the middle school level, but then at the elementary level also continue to have additional opportunities as they move up through middle school.
But just to add, you could
Okay,
expand
wait, I got my other thing.
hang
Okay.
on, but you could expand that still with the same for art teachers. You could
Yes.
still, there's still time within their schedule, even still.
And I just want to,
the other logistics, but.
And the other thing is, when we think about art celebrations, one of the things that has come so clear to me and to the team who's working on this, which is really all the elementary administrators. I have Mike Yeaget at the high school, Linda Johnson at the elementary school, is that art and student art, if this is a district that values art, we should bump into it when we're getting a bagel. We should see it on the streets. So we are not looking to just revamp a once a year celebration of student art. We are looking to have student art integrated across the entire town, have it displayed across the entire town, because that's another way that you make those pathways. That's how student artists start to see themselves as artists. We want our artists to enter their work in different contests, just like our musicians go to all states. So these are all of the different ways that we're just starting to begin to grow this program. This is a program that has not been looked at K-12, from what I've heard, for 16 years. We do not have an art leader. We don't have an art administrator. This work is done because we are all passionate about it. This is something that we care very, very much. And we absolutely believe all the research on the connection between art and social emotional wellness. Our K-12 art department had incredible high quality professional learning from the Aldrich Museum at the beginning of the year. And the main takeaway from that learning was how to use art to help kids transition back into school. So we are aligned. We believe in this deeply, 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 but we want to grow in a wide way. And we know that this is a fiscally conservative town, and we don't want to ask for money until we have a clear pathway proposal for what that's going to look like, because we know that where we are now, we can continue to develop those opportunities for our students with what you've given us now. So I just hope that you trust in the work that the team has done. We've shown that we've been responsive. We want to partner with the parents. I've met some amazing artists in the last week. I've met former art teachers. There's so much good that's happening here. So I'm asking that you give us the opportunity to do that work together in partnership with the town. And when we need the money for that artist in residence program, for visiting artists, not just visiting authors, I promise that we'll ask.
Thank you. Ken, you were next.
Yeah, my concerns have been addressed. Thank you.
Tina, and then Selena.
I had to bring this up because I know there are the things that Corey and Dr. De Silva have talked about. I've heard about this, right? I know that art has had an has not been equal across all schools. I know that because as PTAs we were involved, some schools have artists in residence, some had Art Leap, some had, oh my God, PACE, when they came up and talked about it. I think it was so important that you talk about this so parents can understand. It is so vital. The vision that you shared, it is so important for us to hear this, because I think, to Selena's point, there is this feeling that there's a loss in art, but I think you addressed that that's not true. Yes, the structure of how we deliver art, maybe that's shifting, and it's tough for something to, of course, as any change, anytime there's a change, there's a concern that rises because it doesn't translate well. I think it also brings home to the point that we need to communicate this better. We need to keep communicating, because when you talk about this, I'm so excited. I want to talk about this and I want to hear more about it. And I think we did a great job when music came and presented in November. And I think we need to keep having these conversations. I truly respect the fact that you were fiscally responsible to this. I know this is a tough town. We are always told our budgets don't line up with what the town ask is. I know eventually the Board of Finance will come down. And this is just a note to all the parents who are watching. When it goes down, whenever the board adopts the budget, whatever number it is, please support this budget to the Board of Finance, whatever you feel, but you need to let the Board of Finance know. And I'm saying this from being part of this for so many years. So I'm so glad that you shared that, because I do think it was vital. It was important for all parents to hear this, because there's this lack of communication. I'm hopeful that we can talk about this. We can continue these conversations. I do trust you. At the end of the day, I have to trust our teachers and administrators. And I do trust you at this point. So thank you.
Thanks, Tina. Selena, and I think Liz had her hand next.
So I think I just heard you say, though, that you're expanding a program, but the kids aren't going to get any more art because you still have 4 teachers. You're not planning on hiring any more teachers next year. You're just making a more robust program. Did I hear that right?
Corey, you want me to take? Go ahead.
And also my question, I'm going to go back to this. You can expand a program and make it more robust and still have 2 teachers teaching at the same time. Art teachers are quite capable of lesson plans and giving those children more art. You can do it together.
Oh, absolutely. We think our teachers are very, very capable.
Right.
Really what we're saying is with the current staffing, we can continue to expand Art Leap. We have started to expand Art Leap. That means that there is still time in their day that is not contractual time, that is outside the time that they get for preparation and materials management to continue to expand the program, Art Leap.
So the children next year will be getting art twice a week or twice in a 6-day cycle, like they get music?
Art Leap is not the same as a traditional art class, Selena. Art Leap is, in the past, it was by invitation. We removed that.
I know what Art Leap is. That's kind of a rhetorical question. Sorry.
Oh,
I didn't mean to cut you off, but yeah.
Then I'm not sure what your question is. Is it a real
So-
question?
Well,
I don't believe so.
so you're just expanding one program. You're not really giving the kids more art.
So in that particular case, Art Leap, for those students who wanted to access additional art, depending upon the grade level, I think now it's 5th. I think we were thinking about 4th, if I'm correct, Corey. Then students who wanted to experience, like the analogy that Corey gave was like music, right? When you're interested, you can go to chorus, you can go to lessons, right, for band. Similar to that, you can go to an extra art. That's what that experience that Corey is describing is an additional Art Leap. What I think you're saying, Selena, is every student going to access another art class? Not right now. That's not what we're proposing.
Thanks. Liz?
If that was your question?
That was my question.
Thank you. My totally different observation, and I just want to put it out there. I personally will be voting against the budget, and I'd like to explain why. Over the course of since the 2018-2019 school year, we've lost 338 students based on our projected enrollment for last year. We've got a little over 4 less teachers, but our administrative totals have gone up. And if you look at the ratio of administrative roles versus teacher roles, since the 2018-2019 school year, it's gone up at least 2%. And so when I look at the budget and I look at the town budget going up by 3%, the burden on families that are going to have to dig and reprioritize whether they have children in the school or not, based on their property taxes being increased by the town, based on the inflationary pressures, yet we continue to add people and headcount to the schools with declining enrollment. That to me is highly concerning. Any business, and that $100 million is a business, would tell you, and you always recognize, headcount and the salaries and benefits associated with people are the biggest part of our budget. And when we go into these discussions, it's always, well, we have to give people raises. Well, we have to pay for more insurance. but yet we never look at the overall organizational efficiencies that can be gained from really taking a hard look at what's in the classroom and what's out of it. We just add. And I know there was some puts and takes in this year, but ultimately when I see 338 less students, I shouldn't see a 9.5+% admin to teacher ratio that's up, 2% from prior years. So, if we really start digging in the numbers and say, as the board of directors for this school, we are spending more on less customers, and those customers are our students. And the concerning thing is the ratio is less in the classrooms, and we can say all day long that coaches float around classrooms and support classrooms and whatever. But I think we say it's a responsible budget is a very large increase for the town and the taxpayers, on top of other really large financial pressures that this town is going to see with declining enrollment. So I'd look at the ROI on those spends, and I just can't support the mix of headcount that we have right now. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Thanks, Liz. Any other questions or comments about the budget or motions? Sean?
Yeah, more of a comment than a question, given the late hour. I don't want to belabor this much, but I again thank the administration for their deep dive on the arts program. It was thorough, it was complete, it was informative, and I've said it a million times. I'm glad we're finally refocusing on the curriculum as a whole and integrating it together. So it's wonderful to see that. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Any other topics or any motions to amend? Or are we ready to move forward? Oh, Tom, thank you, Selena.
Tom, you're on mute.
Thank you. And follow up to Liz's point, where the comment was made that we need to take a good hard look at the numbers, which I agree with. But correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. De Silva. How many hours would you say your team has already spent taking a good hard dive look at the numbers?
Too many to count. And I hope that Liz and the board, I think generally speaking, probably knows that. I was reflecting on something that I said and that Liz Flogel actually said the other day, or maybe it was the 2 meetings ago, when I think I said that the budget was fiscally conservative. And I think Liz had mentioned that she didn't think it was. And I reflected upon that word, and I think, or those words, and I think ultimately, when you see a 4.79% increase or a 4.98% increase in a school budget, that doesn't feel like a conservative number. I think the point that is important that you all hear is, and Corey said it well, is we could walk into this budget, ask for 2 more art teachers, 2 more music teachers, and a lot of other things, and people will be really happy. But we ask for what we need. And this budget, Tom, is asking for what we need. And yes, there has been a restructuring in administrative staff, because there wasn't administrative staff leading departments for many, many years. I think I heard Corey say no one's been paying attention to some special areas for 16 years. And that's not just art, by the way, that's across many domains. And so you need content leadership, you need leadership, and sometimes you have to restructure. And I think we've done a really good job of restructuring over the past couple of years to try to do a lot with a little. And this budget is still doing a lot with a little, even though maybe conservative isn't the right word, to Liz's point. But what I do know for sure, and I worry about, because I've seen what's happened from the Board of Education to the Board of Selectmen to the Board of Finance in the past 2 years. And I worry significantly about what a cut will do to the school system, because I know what's in this budget that can't go away. And I know that Liz Hannaway is probably putting her head down for that reason right now, is that there is a lot of costs associated with students with IEPs. It's our responsibility. We love them. We welcome all students, but there are some significant costs related to IEPs that can't go away. So when here we are talking about adding I'm wondering what's going to need to be cut, because if history repeats itself, I don't know what will happen to this to this budget and the impact that it will have on kids. And I truly worry about that. So Tom, to your point, many, many hours starting in October. This is not a team that hasn't done their due diligence. They have flipped over every rock several different times. And to be honest, we're in the process of doing that now. And there aren't rocks to be turned. And so, what I would say to you is whether you want to call it conservative, what it is a budget that reflects what we need, what we absolutely need. And I think if you look around in other districts that perhaps aren't quite as conservative as Ridgefield is, that haven't had the cuts that we've had over the past couple of years to the proposed budget, to subsequently the Board of Education's adopted budget, you'll notice that their rates, their percentages are higher than ours. In some cases, significantly higher, and some are a little bit slightly lower, but they haven't had the reductions that we've had. And so there really isn't wiggle room here. Which is just the reality. A lot of hours, a lot of time, a lot of energy, and people just trying to do right by a community that care, and they care deeply about kids. They want to make sure the kids have what they need to be successful. And I think right now, this budget as it is will get us there. Any cuts will impact us.
Thank you. Well said. Any other questions or comments? Selena?
I just want to be clear that I was not asking to add 2 art teachers to the budget without asking you to go back and tweak it and look and see if you could find a way to fit those art teachers in and maybe take something else out, because I do feel like it's a little top heavy in the administration too. So I feel like the money should go back into the classroom. And Corey, I think you've done a great job. I feel like we need art for all kids, not just kids who show an interest or whatever, because a first grader might be interested. She might not be, as interested in math or science. Maybe she struggles. Maybe she wants to work with her hands or something. And we're telling her, nope, you only get art every 6 days. Sorry, that's just the way it is. We've decided that we're not interested in you. So And that is what we're telling these kids. And we've been telling them that for 3 years now. So I'm frustrated because I'm not, and I know other parents are frustrated too. I'd look at the program that we had 4 years, maybe it was either 3 or 4 years ago. When my kids were in school, it was unbelievable. And maybe it wasn't consistent across all the schools, but it was fantastic in every school. Consistent doesn't always mean good. And consistent doesn't always mean bad. It just means different. Sometimes different is okay. It just means different things, different activities. I mean, I've never talked to one mom who had kids my age who hated their art program. It was phenomenal. I mean, outstanding. My child was an art docent. All my kids loved it, and they're all 3 totally different. So that's what I'm saying. That's why I was pushing you to answer that question. You're not talking about all children getting more art with your program. And
I do have to, I'm sorry. It is true that prior to 2017, so I'm not sure when your kids were at RPS, but art was only once a week.
Scott, I'm talking about the elementary schools.
At the elementary school prior to 2017. It was only once a week. It was only once a week.
If I may, Jonathan, I do feel like I need to respond to the administrative top heavy. I would suggest that anyone who thinks that we're administrative top heavy in Ridgefield, look at any district within our district reference group in terms of population of students, number of schools. We are absolutely not top heavy. And in fact, I think we've been really careful because we never want anyone to be perceived that we value one population more than another. We value our educators and we value the direct contact with kids. Our administrators have direct contact with kids as they do with families. Within our DIRG, I could assure you that we have the least number of administrators in comparison to the population of students and schools. And I would charge anyone to take a look at the administrative structures in any community. And we do a lot with little here, and I think we're proud of that, to be honest. And I think as a result of having what we have to work very tightly and closely, but we are not administrator top heavy at all.
Thanks. Do Do we have any motions to amend this budget either up or down? Anything that somebody wants to make a motion to increase or a motion to decrease? Any other comments then before we take a vote on the budget as presented? Tom?
Thank you. I just wanted to say that we should support the superintendent's budget. All of the good points Sean made about why we should go back to parents making the decision about eliminating masks and children not faring well over the last year and a half to 2 years is all the more reason why we need to support the system and district in listening to what they need.
Thanks, Tom. Tina?
I agree with Tom. We have to support the good work. And I'm again going to say this for every parent who's listening. This will go to the Board of Finance. We know how this rolls. So if you support whatever you feel, you need to let the Board of Finance know, because then it'll be beyond our hands. And I'm listening to this conversation. Correct me if I'm wrong. Any cuts will somehow come from our kids and affect our kids. And I think that's another point we have to keep driving home. I did not make this budget. I trust the people who made this budget. I trust our, I've said it throughout this meeting. I trust our administration to do the best for our kids. We have to give them, this is their expertise. We're 9 people. We can at least agree on that beyond politics. And our mission as a Board of Ed is about education, is about kids. That's our main scope. That's our goal, doing the best for all our kids. And if our administration is saying this is the budget that is going to hopefully move our kids, our schools forward, I think we have to trust it. And I need to keep saying this because I know how this rolls. Eventually, this will go to the Board of Finance, so we will need support. So I do thank you, and I look forward. I will say this, to Selena's point, I respect that point. I do understand where the concerns are rising. When we move forward, I would like to hear more about how art is growing, how this affects all the kids, K to 12. I think this is so important, and I think we can have it at curriculum committee also meetings, but we also need to bring it to the bigger board and update it how this is affecting kids, because I do respect that point.
Thank you.
I can't support a budget that just doesn't have art in it. I mean, I just can't. It's
Okay.
another year. And that's why I was asking respectfully if you could go back. It's another year that we've kicked this can down the road. And I feel very strongly about that. So I was asking if there was a way you could tweak it and somehow these kids have been through enough. And we've pulled that out from them. And we test these kids to death. And we take away their essentials. And yes, these are essentials. They're not specials. They're not extras. They're essentials. So I was asking if there was a way you could do that, not added on top. I am very sensitive to the fact that it's a big increase to some people. So I really am respectfully asking if there's any way, because I don't want to vote no on this.
The vote is tonight. We do have a motion on the table. I will entertain motions to increase in the art, and I will entertain motions to decrease elsewhere.
You can actually put it off and call a special meeting.
I don't
and
believe
we can
anything would
vote
change
another
between
time.
now and then. Do we have anything else? Motion is on the table. All those who would like to approve the superintendent's proposed budget at 4.79%, please raise your hands. 7, all those abstaining? All those against? 2, the motion passes 7-2. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Next up is an item of information on our ESSER grants. Who's going to take us through that?
Yes, this will be quick. The reason I'm actually sharing this in all transparency is because the Board of Finance asked for it tomorrow, and I don't want them to have something that you don't have. And just an FYI, Dr. Hannaway will be spending her evening tomorrow with the Board of Finance and discussing special education and the impact on the budget. So this will be.
They gave me 15 minutes on the agenda.
They did? Uh-oh.
I'll do my best.
Ruh-roh, Scooby, that's not going to happen. We all know that.
We'll try.
All right, so very quickly, you remember that we had ESSER grant. That one was easy. We presented to the Board of Finance throughout last year. That was primarily spent on distance learning, software, the access to the technology for kids. We had ESSER 2. That's our the second grant that we received. If you remember, that was about $437,000, a little bit over that. There was very specific focus of how we could spend that money. And we spent that on Bridge, the second session of Bridge 2, I would call it. And we're now spending the remainder of that on the development of a tutoring program outside the school day in person for students that are at risk. That structure or that model will look different by level. So we're in the process of looking at that. You might remember we talked about that at the Board of Education level. We have ARP ESSER. That's the biggest chunk of money that we have. Also very specific to how we spend that money. So we're spending it very specifically on children. The one that's about a little bit under $1 million, that's $983,462. The biggest shift in the way that I originally wrote that grant and what I haven't done yet, but plan to do, you might remember last year, we had a very difficult time when COVID hit, offering transportation for students who were out of district. This year we budgeted under about $120,000 in hopes that we were going to get 2 in-district transportation vehicles. So I'm planning on amending this grant if we don't have money within the general budget to pay for those 2 transportation vehicles. That's about $90,000. The remainder of those funds, as of right now, are intended to be spent on Bridge again this summer. Families should expect to hear more about the Bridge summer program once Corey can get her head around it. So that will happen.
Bridge extension, not Bridge.
Okay, all right, Bridge extension in July. So we're planning on that, and that'll continue on hopefully for one more summer, depending on funding. And again, with the tutoring. The ARP ESSER special education funds, those you might remember are written to support students with specifically with dyslexia. So we have some services planned for those population of children during the summer. It's also paying for tuition and tutors for students with IEPs. So that's basically that. We've heard it before, but I just wanted to be sure that you heard it prior to us communicating that out to the Board of Finance tomorrow night.
Okay, thank you very much. And next up is correspondence to the board, starting with public comment. Rachel?
So good evening, everyone. As a kind reminder, you will have 3 minutes for public comment. Please state your name and address before going forward. So I'll call your name. First person, Catherine.
Do you want to come back, Rachel? And John Mansfield, can you promote the next person maybe?
Yep. Give me the next person's name.
Sure, Mackenzie. No. Catherine? Catherine White. There's 2 Catherines.
I think they may be having trouble unmuting. I'm hearing some.
Oh, okay.
Some people are declining to be promoted as well.
Oh.
Catherine did come in though.
Okay. Thank you, John. Thank you, Liz.
Hi, sorry about that.
Oh, it's okay.
I just had a question as a preschool parent with the Ridgefield Public School program at Barlow. Just my concern, which I know was addressed, just relating to the non-mask policy opening for February 28th, and how that would affect the preschool students, knowing that it does sound like they will be on the same level as the rest of the schools from K through 12. And just my question was that I was under the understanding that the preschool level was going to be determined by the Office of Early Childhood Education, not just the Office of Child Education and Department of Health. And just wanted to verify that. Thank you so much.
Jonathan, just for Catherine's benefit and others, so we can create an FAQ, something like that, so that we can get all these questions answered. So Catherine, we'll be sure to get that answer to you.
Thanks. So we'll follow up.
Thank you.
Of course.
Okay, next, Christine Moore.
Hi there, can you see me?
We can.
Okay. Hi, good evening, everyone. I wanted to thank you first, Dr. De Silva, and members of the board for all of the hard work that you do. You're amazing, and I want you to know that we, especially in this household, appreciate you. Secondly, I want to thank you, Dr. De Silva, and your task force for removing the mask mandate. I almost burst into tears. I have been feeling this very strongly, as you know, for a while. And I think it's long overdue, and it shows respect for our children, not only their physical health, but as Sean McAvoy pointed out tonight, their social, emotional, and mental well-being. This is about choice, parents' choice. And, you know, whether it's regarding masks or vaccines, it's a parent's choice. So I thank you for that. I also want to thank you for adding public comment at the beginning of meetings. I think it really will help to strengthen the homeschool partnership. And on that note, I just wanted to take issue with some comments that were made earlier about, I appreciate your robust discussion earlier about the policy, about screenings. But I do take issue with some of the comments that were made. I think that asking questions, whether it be in email or even on social media, you know, it should not be considered stirring up controversy. Nor do I think that any parent in this community, and I quote, believes that a math teacher will be performing brain surgery in the bathroom. I found that comment to be flippant and unnecessary, and I think it belittles the concerns from the Ridgefield community, quite frankly. The world has changed significantly over the past 2 years, and our children have suffered. I think revisiting policy, whether it's on masks or medical screenings, is very important. Including parents in that discussion is essential. So again, I want to thank you for all that you do, and thank you for letting me speak tonight.
Christine, I just want to check, you had a letter requested to be read. Are you okay on that since you spoke this evening?
Yes, the only thing I would like to thank you, Rachel. The only thing I did, the letter that I wanted to mention is that I wanted to add the one part that I applaud Liz Flogel for asking those hard questions at the last Board of Ed meeting, because I think that it's important to have those conversations. And I was, you know, those questions fell. The silence was deafening. That was the part I wanted the community to hear, and the board. It was concerning. So I really applaud her for asking those questions. And I really, again, appreciate the robust discussion that you all had, and expressing your point of view. So thank you for all you do.
Thank you. Okay, we'll try Mackenzie. No, John, we'll come back. Anna.
Yep.
Anyone else feel the excitement when we see their little box come up? They're like, look, they're here.
Good evening. This is Anna.
Hi, Anna.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I believe that the time has come to free our children from the monstrous impacts of the mask mandates, and I commend you for recognizing that our children have suffered enough for finally protecting our children and their mental health, and as a result, approving a mask optional policy. So thank you very much. And I'd like to focus also now on the non-emergency invasive examination policy. I understand where it's coming from, but I'm still unclear as to why this policy is included in the first place. During today's meeting, the attorney said, if we would ever have to do this, what does she mean by this? Neither she nor any member of the board has provided any context and not one example under which students would be subjected to this policy. This is not political. Parents on both sides have been alarmed by this policy. Please also help me understand why this policy wasn't discussed in detail during the policy committee meeting. Only grammatical errors were pointed out at that time, but the substance of the policy wasn't addressed at all, and it hasn't been addressed in this meeting either. If it wasn't discussed then, can you please explain what we can expect from the policy committee this time around? And lastly, in light of this consistent ambiguity, I'd like my specific questions related to this policy answered as requested in my letter, which you will probably read today. I received a response stating that the RPS does not intend to follow this policy, but intentions are irrelevant as they can change. So once again, I ask that you respond and answer the questions posted in my letter either right now or in writing. Thank you.
Anna, before you leave, let me just check. You did request your letter to be read this night during public comment. Would you rather a response from our superintendent, Dr. De Silva? Or
if it would help to read the letter so that the public knows the questions I have, then feel free to read it for sure. And if you feel like it's better to answer in writing, I'm okay with that as well.
I think as our community member, I will do what you would like me to do.
Okay, then please go ahead and read it. Thank you.
I will. Thank you, Anna. Okay, so we will come back to the letter. Next, Michael.
Which one would you like? There's two, Rachel.
Oh, I'm just going down the list. So the one at the top.
Hey, this is Michael. Hopefully everyone can hear me. 256 Spring Valley Road. I'd like to thank you for the time and for the great discussion tonight. Just one thing I wanted to bring up. First of all, thank you for the removal of the mask mandate. I think that's so important for development, emotional intelligence for our kids. One thing I just noticed in the discussion on vaccines that wasn't brought up is natural immunity. And I want to make sure that's part of the equation too. I know that came up during the conversation in some of the younger grades in the elementary, where I believe 57% or roughly was quoted. I just want to say as a parent, we also look at natural immunity, and our kids have had COVID, so we don't necessarily feel compelled to get them a shot for something that they've had and had either very mild or no symptoms. So just want to thank you, reiterate just how glad we are about removing the mandate. And I just want to make sure that natural immunity continues to be at least part of the equation and part of the discussion for kids too. So I think really the numbers are really, if you add that in, the level of immunity is probably far higher than the numbers that were quoted. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Next public comment, Michael, the next Michael, John.
Hey, I'm joined by my son who is way past his bedtime tonight, but I thought it was important for him to maybe sneak behind me. But I just wanted to say that I had very different questions prepared depending on the outcome of the mask mandate vote. But I just wanted to thank Dr. De Silva and all the board members who voted or discussed to unmask our kids. So as a father of a child with glasses whose glasses fog up and he struggles to see the board and play with his friends with his glasses fogged up, it means a lot to us that you guys made that decision tonight. So I just wanted to say thanks.
Thank you.
Nice. Oh, Marco.
Okay. Next, I believe, John, we have a phone number. Okay.
They came in, but they're muted, so I'm unsure.
Oh, okay. But they're in.
Do you have the ability to unmute them?
I sent them the ask to unmute. That's what I have.
Okay.
Miss, no.
I think if you're on your phone, isn't it like *6? We can come back.
Oh, why don't you leave them in the waiting room and maybe go to the next person while they sort through it?
Okay, okay.
I mean, leave them in the room. Sorry.
Luciana.
They declined, Rachel.
They declined. Okay. Oh, she has her hand up, John.
I promoted them again.
Okay.
They declined again.
They declined again. Okay. Mackenzie. No, John.
No response.
Okay. Willie. Okay. Jennifer. Are they not responding, John?
No, it looks like they may have declined.
Okay.
John, just a thought, Rachel, maybe if you let everyone in and then Rachel can just call on them. So that way the lag time in between, if you just promoted everyone.
Okay.
We'll try it.
All right. Well, the next person would be John.
Hi, my name is John Scala, 36 South Olmsted Lane. First of all, I just wanted to kind of applaud Dr. Susie De Silva and Ed Briggs and everybody and say thank you very much for the idea that these masks are going to be off our children. I think it's long overdue, and thank you. And I hope that as we move forward into an endemic situation that we can continue to understand that putting masks back on our kids is not an option for any reason. And I hope that there are other people that can look at the science behind cloth masks and understand that our children shouldn't be in them to begin with. I also wanted to touch on the topic of the non-invasive medical procedures in the schools. Thank you, Sean, for catching that and not allowing this to be pushed further. And just wanted to say the push for some people to just push past that on the board was a little disheartening. I think that's something that needs to be looked at and that we should all be accountable to. So just wanted to say those things, and thank you guys for all that you do.
Thank you. Okay, John, did you let anyone else in the room?
I have not, because I'm not sure who has spoken and who hasn't.
Okay, so next would be Stephen.
And Luciana still has her hand up as well. So I think
I'll give her a second.
Thank
give her, yep.
Hello.
Yes, hi.
Hi. Good evening. Happy Valentine's Day. It's been a pleasure spending this 3 hours and 18 minutes with you all. This is Steve Jamison. I'm on West Mountain Road, and my family has 2 children, 2 boys in Scotland, and we believe it's time to remove the masking requirements.
We did.
Mask choice and respect for others' mitigation strategies with respect to COVID will also reduce the division between us families and the public officials as well. Our family is counting on you and the board and the superintendent to get our children's life back to normal. Thank you.
So Stephen, it is removed, just so you know.
The mask mandate?
Yes, starting February 28th.
No, well, it's not removed yet, right? Because you haven't got guidance from the state, right?
Stephen, as of February 28th, if nothing changes at the Board of Education meeting today, Ridgefield Public Schools, again, if nothing changes, masks will no longer be mandated.
I hope so. Great. Thank you.
Welcome. Okay, I see Luciana.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Rachel.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, I appreciate everyone taking the time tonight and definitely appreciate the healthy discussion. I had an impassioned plea to read about unmasking our kids. Really can't thank you enough for making that possible for them. Just shifting to the policy discussion quickly. I guess the one thing I don't understand is why the idea of removing this disputed section of the policy is unpopular when no one can really think of an example of when we would need it. The section seems to have predated everyone on the board, and if it doesn't serve the community's needs at this point, it should probably be omitted. Also, as Board Member Flogel mentioned, surrounding districts don't have this policy. So why are, they seem to be getting along fine without it. And one thing that really was like a red flag was like, are we really being threatened by the federal government regarding funding for fine-grained elements of our local district policy? That sounds kind of off to me. And I guess the last thing I wanted to say on that whole piece is, I feel like I shouldn't have to say it, but since the attorney said it so many times that we're being protected, to me, it seems like if we need to add a clause to protect parents and students from a policy when we could just remove it, those options really need to be considered. So that's all I wanted to say. And again, thanks for taking the time to hear us all out tonight, and happy Valentine's Day.
Luciana, before you go, you had requested a letter to be read aloud. Are you okay with it not, since you spoke this evening?
Yeah, I meant to mention that. I'm fine. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
You too.
Okay, Lori?
You also have John in the meeting too as well. I don't remember if they've spoken or not.
Yes, John Scala has spoken, yes.
Hi, sorry, this is.
Oh. Hello?
Lori declined. I don't know who just spoke though.
Okay, Lori.
I think that was potentially Mila Scala, who was on the participant list. She may have been joining in under
The phone.
Oh, under John?
Oh, should I bring them back in then?
Yeah, bring them back in so that way we could, yes. Yeah, thank you, John.
Mm-hmm.
I want to make sure we get everybody.
Hi, everybody. Yes, this is Mila Scala. Sorry, I wanted to avoid the echo that can happen sometimes when two Zooms are happening. So thank you for hearing my signals. First off, I just wanted to say thank you for your dedication. Thank you for asking the difficult questions. I really appreciate some of this like out of the box thinking that I've started to see, and some really collaborative back and forth. So I really applaud you guys for that. I'm really happy to see the community to continue to learn and get engaged and ask questions. So I hope that, we can continue to see that because, as it's been stated, times have changed, and it's just no longer, I remember there was a day that parents would willfully, trustfully send their kids to school, and those times have changed. So, all of these parents that say like, oh, what's the big deal? Like that, we don't all share in that sentiment. Like there are some risks we're willing to take, and there's some risks that we're not. And I think that we all should have the autonomy to make those decisions for our family. I really want to thank Ed Briggs. It is important that we move on. Those words really resonated with me, and I hope that we can all absorb those and reflect on that and move forward however we need to. A couple more things. I appreciate the deep dive on the arts. If we are to be a town of the arts, then we need to rise to the occasion. So I'm looking forward to learning more. I don't know what the solution is, but it's important for us to learn more. Like we said, if we want to be Ridgefield, the town of arts, like our arts department, cannot be on the floor. So I'm looking forward to learning more. Like I said, there were a couple of comments on the agenda. Again, like this is exactly the out of the box thinking and the collaboration I'm looking for. So I appreciate that we're going to have some more flexibility here. I would like to reiterate that I think that each person should be given the option. Do I want to speak before or after or, I don't have a preference. I think that people can probably dictate for themselves, like, where are they best suited, and then you guys can take it from there. I don't believe that we should put an end cap to this. I've heard, some people continuing to it feels like you're cutting off the lines of communication to me. And when I don't see you at live meetings and you're asking to cut time off for the public, it's really concerning. So I would really like anyone that feels that way to rethink how they're going to add value to this Board of Ed and to this community. If you don't have time or you have other priorities and commitments, then you need to be truthful to yourself and to us, because we're all parents, we're all very vested in Ridgefield, and we will take the time that it takes to think through all the decisions that must be made. And you know what? I might have a strong opinion on something, but I want to hear what everybody else has to say. And that's the kind of collaboration and communication I'm looking for. It's really disheartening when people seem to come in with extremely strong opinions and very obviously aren't interested in listening to opposing viewpoints. We all can learn something from each other here. That's the idea, is that that's why you were all appointed to this board. What else? When it came to this health assessment, I will say that there were a handful of people that just made some very casual comments on this topic, and I don't appreciate it. Okay, this is not funny. I don't think that it's funny that you can't come up with an instance on why you would have to put an incision in my child. That's not funny. I don't think it's funny that you talked amongst your colleagues and like you can't come up with anything. It's a very serious matter. I don't appreciate this enthusiasm towards fear. If you're like, fear is it does biological harm to your decision making, right? So people that believe in science should look at the science of fear and how it affects your cognitive decision making. On that note, I really hope that things don't flip tomorrow with the Department of Health. I really have a lot of faith in the people that are in charge of looking at the numbers on a daily basis. I think 57% for this younger cohort of kids is pretty substantial. And if you can't understand why that number is not going to go higher, then potentially you should rethink your role on this board. With that, thank you so much. Keep up the awesome work. I am looking forward to continuing to stay engaged, continuing to learn. I'm happy you guys are challenging each other and collaborating. So thank you again, and take care.
Thank you so much. Next public comment, Evan.
Evan declined.
Evan declined. Okay, can we go to Catherine again? John, please, at the bottom. Did she decline too before, or I just want to make sure we get her if she.
I believe so. There may be some other people who have joined since we started. There's a second Catherine with a C as well.
Yes, can we try her, John, please? Thank you.
Catherine with a K declined. Catherine with a C has joined.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, I apologize for not getting on earlier when asked. I had some chaos in the room and had to take an important phone call and disappeared from the meeting for a little while. So I apologize if I'm repeating things that were spoken about, in the last 20 to 30 minutes. So I'll make this just kind of short and sweet. I'd like to thank the entire board for their service always, and specifically Dr. De Silva and the task force for the work that they've done regarding this mask issue in particular. Most recently, I'm in agreement with the decision regarding mask choice come the 28th. And I really think that we are at a point where we need to consider the holistic, health needs of all of our children. And it's no longer a, one size fits all approach, and that we have to allow for individual consideration of each kid's mental and physical health and circumstances, and beyond what Sean mentioned regarding, mental health issues, there are physical health issues with regard to masking children. Maybe there's a child with sensory disorders or another one with severe asthma, and being in a mask for, 7 hours a day in school, and then an additional, 5 hours a week on a bus. And maybe that child plays sports for another, 20 hours a week. That's a lot of masking. So I'm happy to see that our task force and our superintendent are thinking about all of those different aspects and consideration. And I really think, the right path moving forward is mask choice and allowing parents to participate in that assessment for all of their children. I also wanted to touch on something that was discussed regarding, vaccination rates and how that may play into conversations moving forward with regard to the DPH or, the Connecticut State Board of Education deciding whether to change things on a statewide basis for us. And in particular, Ms. Bell was very concerned about the 57% vaccination rate for our children who are between the ages of 5 and 11. And I just wanted to point something out that might be something for her to consider and for others to consider as these, conversations may potentially continue in the future. And that is the fact that we've had 732 cases, in our school district amongst our children. And, that probably comes out to around a fifth or a sixth of our kids in the district having had COVID of some form. I'm not even sure that's probably a minimum number. The number is probably higher than that. And, more and more, we are seeing information about the durability of unvaccinated individuals experiencing COVID in a natural kind of a way. So I would direct you to a study that just came out from Johns Hopkins. It's dated February 3rd of this month, and it's called Prevalence and Durability of SARS-CoV Antibodies Among Unvaccinated US Adults by History of COVID-19. And it's just something to consider as we move forward. I think it's kind of reassuring. It's kind of a positive to add to the conversation as we talk about protecting the society and the children, at large, because I think that's a net positive contribution to the protection that we are giving to our kids. But thanks again. I appreciate you taking the time to hear me out. And I thank you for your service. And I hope you have a good night.
Thank you. Okay, so John, I think we got everybody at this point, and the ones that are still in the waiting room have either declined or didn't pick up, correct?
Maybe, did we call on Stephen?
Yes, we did.
Okay, then I think you've hit everybody.
Did you call on Evan?
Yeah.
I believe so. I can do it again if you'd like.
Sure.
No, I'm just looking at the list.
Okay.
I think he declined, but absolutely. You want to try him again, John? See?
Yep. Just did it again.
Okay.
Jen Bradshaw, you got her?
I don't know that we did. Rachel, did we get Jennifer?
Let me just go down my list here.
We had a couple of people pop in.
She declined.
Okay,
Yeah.
I just invited her again. Evan did decline again.
Okay, sure.
Did we get
Yes.
Luciana?
Yes.
Yes.
Evan has his hand up now, John, just FYI.
Okay, I'll try him again. Oh, it went down. And back up. Jennifer declined as well.
Okay. And Evan has his hand up. Maybe he's having technical difficulties.
This is what we experience as teachers. Up, down, up, down.
He is coming in now.
Okay, great. Thank you, John.
Hi, hello. My name's Evan. I'm a sophomore at Ridgefield High School, and I'd just really like to quickly say thank you for taking away this mask mandate. It means a lot. It's been tough, really, like not being able to really see people's faces for a while. So thank you. It means a lot. It really does.
Thank you, Evan. Okay.
Danielle just popped in.
Okay. So Danielle?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Danielle.
Okay, thank you. First, I'd like to thank the board for acknowledging the request to allow the community the ability to speak publicly at the beginning and at the end of the meetings. And I just wanted to touch on the masking issue. Regardless of the possible February 28th mask removal date, I'd still like to bring up a few points regarding masking as a choice in the event forced masking becomes a possibility again. I'd like to point out that the CDC conceded publicly that cloth masks, which include surgical masks, do not protect against the virus and are nothing but facial decorations, something Dr. Fauci had said both publicly and privately in early 2020. And yet our children were still forced to wear these facial decorations. Dr. Lena Wen, once a staunch mask mandate proponent, recently went on CNN to discuss one-way masking, where she explained, and I quote, that even if other people around you aren't wearing a mask, but if you wear a high-quality protective mask, that also protects you, the wearer, too. Therefore, masking should be a choice, always. Dr. Wen also said that we must be intellectually honest and that masking young children comes with some risks. Does the district have any plans on how to address the developmental, social, and psychological damage that long-term masking has had on the kids? If not, I suggest you start working on that. I wish I saw the same deep concern about the effects of long-term masking on children as I do in the lack of access to art. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. John, I'm gonna transfer over now. I don't see anyone else on that list.
I believe that's everyone.
That was everyone. Okay. So, okay, I do have two letters in which I'm going to read aloud. Bear with me.
You have 3 minutes.
Oh. Yeah. Ooh, my pew's me. Sorry. Okay. That probably took 3 minutes. Hold on. Okay. So the first one is Anna Elwart. And this was her letter. Dear Board of Education, I'm writing in regards to the proposed RPS proposed policy 5141.3 related to other non-emergency invasive medical examinations / screenings. I would like the following questions addressed and answered prior to the next Board of Education meeting. What is the purpose of this policy? What circumstances would warrant proposed invasive medical examinations? List specific reasons why a student would be subjected to the measures described in the policy. Provide specific examples of what types of examinations would be involved during the exposure of students' private parts. Since there is a distinction made between insertion and injection, provide specific examples of each in the context of these invasive medical examinations. Provide an explanation as to why non-emergency invasive examinations proposed in this policy would not be addressed with a doctor or pediatrician first. Why is this policy, why this policy would be an opt-out and not opt-in policy. Provide explanation as to why non-emergency invasive examinations would be deemed essential for school to administer and therefore a condition of attendance. I'm disturbed that neither the policy committee that brought this policy forth to the BOE nor the superintendent of Ridgefield Public Schools were capable of answering any questions about it during the meeting. This shows a disconcerting lack of knowledge and context and should be alarming to every parent that has children in the Ridgefield Public Schools. Any medical non-emergency invasive examinations should be initiated by the parent with a doctor's consultation, not by a school. I insist for our schools to focus on providing education that has been crippled as a result of COVID in the last 2 years and stray away from attempting to provide additional services that should only be offered at the doctor's office. Please leave medical procedures to experts in the medical field and concentrate on education instead. I object to this policy and request that it be removed. We also received another letter from Erica Somir, Dr. De Silva, Aaron Crook, and all Board of Ed members. I deeply oppose the proposed policy 5141.3 that was discussed at the most recent Board of Ed meeting. Thank you to Liz Flogel for speaking up and asking the important questions that many parents are now also asking. Clarification is needed on the wording of this policy and specific examples of what a non-emergency invasive physical examination is. This is not acceptable for our school district to pass this policy. So I'm going to now move on to the correspondence report. Can everyone still hear me? Because I can't see you guys.
We can.
Okay. So we have received 180 emails since our last Board of Education meeting. 1 email provided feedback on the wellness policy. 19 emails provided feedback on policy 5141.3 subsection 7. 1 email inquired on the technology status update for the BOE meeting room. 2 emails regarded public comment. 1 email provided feedback on the policy committee meeting on 118. 1 email regarded the past outreach committee. 31 emails provided feedback on the proposed budget, in particular art education. 1 email provided feedback on the proposed budget, in particular art, music, and foreign language. 2 emails provided support of the proposed budget. 1 email provided thoughts on the proposed budget. 1 email regarded a personnel matter. 2 emails asked the Board of Education to write a letter to Governor Lamont to end the mask mandate. 99 emails provided feedback for a mask optional policy. 1 email provided feedback for a mask optional policy and was signed by 16 members of the community. 8 emails provided feedback for masks to be required. 1 email provided feedback for masks after break. 1 email provided feedback on Darian's recent decision on masking. 1 email thanked the administration for their efforts during COVID and trust in the district making the right decision on masking. 1 email provided feedback on the proposed budget, in particular art education, and for masking to stay in place. 2 emails provided feedback on policy 5141.3 subsection 7 and for a mask optional policy. 2 emails provided feedback on early care before school, and 1 email provided feedback on pre-K programs. And that would be it for the correspondence report this evening.
Thank you, Rachel. Good job. And thank you to all for a very long, very fruitful evening. Appreciate everybody's participation and patience. We have come to that time where I'm going to ask if anybody has a motion to adjourn.
I so move.
Ken, thank you. Does anybody second? Tina, all those in favor of adjourning, please raise your hands. 8. All those opposed? None? Okay. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.